The Wolf Brothers in New York -1. Prologue. The wind blew over Yaransk like an old breath, bringing with it the ashes of a history that would not die out. The burned houses rose like black skeletons from the frozen earth, and between them, Tarak patiently hammered iron, as if each blow could repair the soul of the village, not just the tools. The fire in the forge was the only sign of life in a place that still smelled of death from his window. He could see the snow-capped mountains and, beyond them, the white forest, the place where it all began. There he had lost his sister, Sayan. There love, curse, and blood had mixed in a story that no one spoke out loud anymore. But Tarak knew that the past could not be buried. That the wolves, even if they were silent, were watching from the shadows, and each in the evening, when the fire died down and the wind picked up, Tarak heard that howl, long, painful, almost human. He knew it was her. That Sayan, the wolf woman, still wandered between worlds. During the day she lived among people, with amber eyes and hands that trembled at the touch of light. Night, when the moon rose, she was lost in white, becoming a beast again. But one night, the silence was broken. On the snow-covered road, a strange light approached, the headlights of a car, something rare in those places. A man in a thick coat got out and smiled at him. "I need a blacksmith," he said. "My car stopped. Can you help me?" Tarak looked up. The stranger had an unfamiliar accent, and his voice carried the echo of other worlds. In that moment, Tarak felt his fate calling him again. Fire, iron, and wolves all seemed to breathe in unison. When the stranger told him he came from a place called New York, Tarak knew his peace was about to end. And somewhere in the forest, Sayan opened his eyes. The moon was looking at her again, and in her howl was mixed the foreboding of a journey without return. New era was beginning, and the shadow in the snow was preparing to cross the ocean. Chapter 1. The Machine in the Blizzard. The wind whipped furiously over Yaransk, transforming the village into an icy ghost. Snowflakes swirled in silvery spirals, and the sharp air bit into the cheeks like a fine blade. In the midst of this storm, a strange noise was heard, unknown to the people there, a deep metallic rumble that echoed through the snow-laden fir trees. Tarak, who was working in his forge on the outskirts of the village, looked up from his anvil. He saw a strange light flickering among the ice floes. It was not a lantern, nor a torch. It was a blinding white light, coming from a large noisy box, the likes of which he had never seen before. A car. The engine coughed, smoked, and finally stopped. A tall man stepped out of the cab, wrapped in a thick black leather coat, with a fur hat on his head and a wool scarf around his neck. He had a clear, curious look, and an attitude that was foreign to that world. The calm of a man who had come from a civilization that no longer knew the fear of cold or wolves. "Hey!" he shouted, over the blizzard. "Is anyone here?" Tarak pulled his leather coat over his shoulders and stepped out into the night. His gray-blue eyes shone in the moonlight, and his beard, covered with frost, made him look like an ice statue. "You're stuck," he said simply. "Yes." The engine stopped. "I think something froze. I'm John Smith, from America." The words sounded heavy, unfamiliar, but Tarak understood them well enough. He approached the car and, with a simple glance, seemed to read it. He opened the hood, touched a few wires and smiled briefly. "You brought fire to the heart of the blizzard," he said. "But fire needs air, not ice." With a sure movement, he disassembled a few parts, cleaned them carefully, then took a piece of metal from his pocket, an improvisation, a fragment of wrought iron, perfectly shaped for a grip. In a few minutes, the engine came to life, crackling like a freed animal. John looked at him in amazement. "How did you do that?" "In New York, I need people like you. Mechanics, blacksmiths, good with their hands." Tarak stood up and looked at him without answering. The smoke from the exhaust rose to the sky, mixing with the vapors of his breath. "New York," he repeated slowly, as if he had tasted the name of a foreign god. Yes, the city that never sleeps. Lights, factories, people everywhere, a place where you can build anything. The words echoed in Tarak's mind like a call. Two voices fought within him. One of the blacksmith who loved the silence of the snow, the other of the wolf who longed for the unknown. Maybe you should see the world, John told him, smiling. You have the hands of a master. In America, you could have a real workshop, not just a frozen hut. Tarak didn't answer, he just looked at the forest and the distance. Her howl could be heard, long, melancholy. It was Sayan. After John left, leaving him a business card and the promise of a new beginning, Tarak stayed in front of the blacksmith shop for a long time. The snow was melting on his shoulders, and the fire in the hearth was burning smoldering. The words New York burned in his mind night. He couldn't sleep, he tossed and turned in the cold bed, and in his dream he saw his brother, Nuri, running through the forest, and Sayan, half woman, half wolf, looking at him with golden eyes. Brother, go, your world is no longer here. The next day, Tarak found Sayan at the edge of the she had silver hair, tied in a long ponytail, and around her neck she wore a white fur scarf. Her eyes were deep, murky, like Siberian lakes before the frost. A man came, Tarak told her. From America, he called me to work there. Sayan smiled bitterly. America? I've heard of that place. Lights, noise, people who forget to look at the sky. Maybe there we can start again, Sayan. Maybe your curse will be easier to bear far from the place where it was born. She looked at him long, sadly. I can't run from the moon, Tarak. Wherever I go, it finds me. Then come with me, at least you won't be alone. The wind fell silent for a moment, as if the forest had listened to their decision. Sayan closed her eyes, and her, the desire for peace and fear of herself mingled. But Tarak's voice was firm, warm, human, the anchor that held her in this world. Okay, brother, she said finally. But promise me that when the moon comes, you won't let me go. Tarak nodded, and the following days, preparations for departure filled the village with rumors. People viewed Tarak as a traitor, but also as a dreamer. To leave Yaransk meant leaving behind not only the cold, but also the root of your soul. Chapter 2. Departure. The blizzard had subsided over Yaransk, leaving behind a strange silence, like a sigh of the earth after a deep wound. The snow-covered houses rested under the leaden sky, and the thin smoke of the chimneys rose lazily, cutting the cold air. For days, the thought of leaving had been gnawing at him. Ever since he had met John Smith, the American with the iron car, the image of the world beyond the forest had not given him peace, a world where the fire never went out, where people did not live in fear that the moon would steal their souls, a world without the wolves of his dreams. However, in Tarak's heart burned a silent pain. Yaransk was not only his village, but the grave of his loved ones. Every street, every tree trunk carried a memory of the curse. Their Ilya, his sister's lover, had died. Their Sayan ended for the first time as a man and was reborn as a she-wolf on the morning of his departure. Tarak stopped in front of the forge. A small flame was still smoldering in the hearth, the last in that place that had been his home. A gust of wind ruffled his black hair, now sprinkled with white threads. He picked up the hammer and carefully placed it on the anvil, a gesture of parting, but also of promise. Behind him, light footsteps approached. Sayan. She wore a thick coat of grey wool, and her silver hair fell freely on her shoulders. Her face was serene, but her eyes betrayed the wolf's restlessness. She looked at him for a long time, as if he were a brother, but also as the last link to the human world. So, you're really leaving, she said softly. Tarak nodded. Yes. John Smith is coming back today. He will take me to the port, then to New York. Sayan fell silent. Around them, the snow began to fall again, gently, like a blessing. And me. Her voice trembled, though she tried to keep it steady. 𝖭𝖏 did not answer immediately. She looked at the fire in the hearth, which was slowly dying, and in the flames she saw the face of their brother 𝖭𝖏, disappeared into the forest. You are bound to this land, Sayan, he said. Your curse comes from the forest, not from me. There is no more forest, 𝖭𝖏. She burst out. Only ruins, only memories. I no longer want to feel the call of the night. I want to be free. Her eyes moistened. 𝖭𝖏 looked at her, and for a moment he saw the girl from before again, gentle, curious, with painterly hands and dreams of life. Your freedom is a double-edged sword, he told her. Then let me hold it. The silence between them deepened, and in the distance, the howl of a wolf was heard alone, an echo of the past. If you come with me, 𝖭𝖏 said finally, you must promise me something. Anything. When the moon rises, you stay in the house, don't open the door, don't look at the sky. Sayan lowered his gaze. Do you think it's that simple? That I can hide from what I am? No, but we can learn to control it. Maybe there, far from this place, it won't be as strong. Maybe the moon doesn't have the same power in the cities of men. Sayan looked up at him, and a strange light, a faint hope, lit up in her eyes. I'll go with you, 𝖭𝖏. He nodded, but didn't smile. Sayan, the moon doesn't disappear anywhere. Remember that. She smiled bitterly. Maybe, but love doesn't disappear either. And you are all I have left. For the first time in a long time, 𝖭𝖏 hugged her. He felt her body shiver, but not from the cold, but from fear and that silence. They both knew that they were not only leaving for a new life, but also for a new challenge. In the evening, the entire village gathered at the edge to watch them leave, and no one said anything. Some made the sign of the cross, others hid their eyes. For them, 𝖭𝖏 was a cursed man who left with the source of misfortune, but also a hero who dared to go beyond the edge of the world. John Smith's truck was waiting with the engine running. When 𝖭𝖏 and Sayan approached, John greeted them with a broad smile. So, have you decided, friend? Yes, but I'm not going alone, she's my sister. John looked at her briefly, and the light of the headlights. Her face seemed unreal, pale, shining, with silver reflections in her hair. Your sister? Beautiful as a northern star, he said admiringly. Sayan smiled weakly. And just as cold, Mr. Smith. They climbed into the cabin, and the way, 𝖭𝖏 looked back. The village was disappearing under the snow, and the flames in the few fireplaces looked like tired fireflies. Silence reigned everywhere. Yaransk was disappearing into the night, and with it their past. When the truck reached the edge of the forest, Sayan turned her head, and a distant clearing, among the trees, she saw a white figure, a she-wolf, staring at her. Those deep golden eyes seemed to be calling her. Don't run from me, Sayan, I am you. She shivered and tightened her arms around her. 𝖭𝖏 noticed her but said nothing. Are you cold? He asked. No, it's just, I feel like the forest doesn't want to let us go. The truck moved slowly, leaving deep tracks in the snow. For a while, no one spoke. Only the engine and the blizzard filled the silence. Finally, 𝖭𝖏 turned his gaze to his sister. When we get there, everything will be different. You're no longer the cursed girl from Yaransk. You're no longer the she-wolf. You're Sayan, the woman who lives among people. She closed her eyes. Deep down, she knew she would never be just a woman. But she wanted to believe. And you, 𝖭𝖏? She asked. Who will you be there? A blacksmith. Nothing more. Maybe it's better that way. The road continued through the night. When dawn broke, they had already passed the mountains. Yaransk had disappeared behind them, hidden under the snow. Ahead, a long road stretched, leading to a world of steel, fire and light. Tarak looked ahead, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. Sayan, next to him, held her hands in her lap, listening to how her heartbeat mixed with the vibration of the engine. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was running towards something, not from something. And yet, somewhere, above the clouds, the moon was hiding behind the morning light. At was just waiting for the night to come, to claim its right again. Tarak did not look back. But deep down he knew that no distance, not even between Yaransk and New York, could extinguish the shadow that followed him. Leaving was not the end curse, it was just the beginning of his journey into a new world. Chapter 3. The Westbound Train. The train hissed like a steel beast in the night, shaking the ground beneath its heavy wheels. Tarak and Sayan. The sound was like nothing they had ever heard before, not the howling of wolves, nor the rustling of the wind through the fir trees, but a deep, living, foreign roar. As they climbed into the third-class carriage, burdened by thick clothes and the silence of a lost world, they felt as if they were stepping not just into a machine, but into another time. Yaransk had been left behind, a shadow in the snow, swallowed by the night. Ahead of them, the westbound train carried dreams, promises, and the unknown. Sayan sat by the window, watching the steam gathering on the glass. He gently wiped it away with his palm and caught a glimpse of the forest receding, the silhouettes of the trees merging with the sky. Her eyes were a mixture of sadness and curiosity, like a creature leaving its nest for the first time. Tarak, sitting next to her, held his large, calloused hands on his knees. His eyes looked ahead, but his mind was still there in his forge, at the hammer resting on the anvil. Around him, people were murmuring, talking about Moscow, about cities, about trade and factories. Tarak listened, but the words seemed to him to be from another language, a language without an echo in his heart. When the train passed over the first large bridge, the metallic noise made him jump. Sayan smiled. "It's like a wolf's howl," she said. "Only it's made of iron." "It's not the same," he replied. "Wolves don't walk on rails." She laughed softly, and her laugh, rare and warm, melted the cold in the carriage for a moment. As the train moved forward, the landscapes changed. Frozen forests, sleeping villages, rivers covered in ice. Every now and then, they passed a station where people in thick coats were waiting with bags at their feet. Sayan watched them, fascinated. "They're all running away," she thought. "But why? Or maybe they're running away, like me, from something they can't overcome." One night, the train stopped in a small provincial town. Tarak got off for a few moments, feeling the need to breathe the cold air. Sayan remained in the carriage, looking at the dim lights in the distance. A brass band was playing a cheerful tune, but the wind was tearing it to pieces. At that moment, in the cloudy sky, the moon, pale, hazy disk. Sayan felt a shiver. Her hands clenched on her knees. Her heart raced. She tried not to look, but instinct was stronger. Her eyes lit up slightly, iridescent with a golden-hued. Child in the carriage looked at her and took a step back, frightened. Tarak climbed in quickly, seeing the change in her gaze. "Sayan, not here," he whispered. "Not now." She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "I can't always control the call, Tarak. The moon. It finds me anywhere." He took her hands in his, squeezing them. "Listen to me, we will soon be in Moscow. There are lights everywhere, you won't see the moon anymore. Maybe it won't be as strong there." Sayan gradually calmed down. The train started again, and its vibrations slowly put her to sleep. In her dream, she ran through the snow, feeling the taste of blood and the smell of freedom. When she woke up, Tarak was sleeping, and outside the sun was rising over the frozen fields. When they reached Moscow, the city seemed like a huge being. The noise, the smell of smoke, the horns, the people crowding the platforms, everything was new. Sayan looked around with wide eyes, like a child. The tall buildings, the trams whizzing by, the shop windows full of lights, everything fascinated her. "This is another world," she said, in a low voice. "Yes," Tarak answered. "The world of hurried people." The smartly dressed man asked for their tickets and showed them the way to the next train. He would take them to the port, to a ship bound for America. The journey through the city was like a dream. On the streets, people were selling newspapers, dogs were barking, children were running after trolleybuses. Sayan felt overwhelmed, but also alive. It was the first time she had felt that she belonged in the human world, that she could be one of them. When they boarded the train heading west, evening had already descended on the city and the distance. The buildings lit up like artificial stars. Sayan pressed her forehead to the window. "It seems like the sky has fallen to earth," she said. "No," Tarak replied. "People just stole the light." He smiled bitterly. He didn't feel at home among so many lights. But he knew he had to move on. The journey across the Urals and then to the port was long. Trains changed passengers, locomotives hissed in the darkness. Each station, Sayan saw new faces, different voices, unfamiliar smells. One night, in a carriage full of merchants, a woman gave him a simple necklace with a green stone. "For luck," she said. Sayan thanked him. Tarak looked at the stone shining faintly in the light and whispered, "Our luck never lay in jewelry." But in his sister's eyes he saw hope, the same hope that had made him accept the journey. When the train reached the port, a huge ship was waiting anchored in the dock. For Sayan, it was something incomprehensible, a floating fortress. The noise of the chains, the cries of the workers, the smoke rising to the sky, everything seemed detached from another world. "That's it?" she asked, amazed. "Yes," said Tarak. "Here the iron road ends and the water road begins." Sayan smiled, with an almost childish emotion. "And beyond the ocean?" "Beyond the ocean, New York," he answered. "The city where iron never sleeps." When the ship pulled out of the harbor, Sayan remained on the deck, looking at the shrinking shore. The snow, the trains, the forests, all had become a memory and their place. Only the endless expanse of water and the salty sea wind. Night, in their modest cabin, Sayan woke up suddenly. The full moon floated over the waves, and its rays penetrated through the window. Her heart contracted. She felt the cold and the silence of the sea. She heard a howl, but it was not the wolves of Yaransk, but her own, a deep echo of the curse. She stood up and looked at the sky. Her eyes lit up slightly, shining like gold. But Tarak, who was sleeping nearby, woke up and took her hand. "No, Sayan, I told you. There's no place for the she-wolf here." She trembled, but she didn't object. "I can't, Tarak. The moon feels me even across the sea." He hugged her, holding her tightly until the moonlight disappeared behind a cloud. Only then did her breathing calm down. The days passed one after another, between the waters and the sky. When they finally saw the shore of America, Sayan felt her heart fill with trembling. Huge buildings rose on the horizon, smoke and noise and light. It was a completely different world, a jungle of steel and fire. Tarak looked at her for a long time. "Welcome to the world of people, Sayan. Here, no one knows who you are." She smiled, but an old restlessness was red in her eyes. "Maybe I don't know, but I do. And that's the hardest thing." The train to New York pulled away from the port. Sayan watched the cities pass by her, like stars in motion. For the first time, she felt that destiny was calling her again, not to the forest, but to a world full of light and darkness. And somewhere, deep in her soul, the she-wolf of Yaransk bared her fangs, waiting for the night when she would be reborn. Chapter 4. Arrival in New York. The train hisses loudly as it enters New York's Grand Central Station, like a steel animal shouting its triumph. The wheels creak, The white steam rises in heavy billows, and the noise of people, footsteps, and voices mingle in a deafening din for Tarak and Sayan, who got off the train with their eyes wide open. It was as if they had stepped onto another planet. The sky. Where is the sky? Sayan murmured, looking up. But there was no sky, just huge walls of glass and steel rising to the clouds. People streamed in waves, hurrying, carrying bags, boxes, newspapers. The air smelled of smoke, of burnt oil, of fried meat and money. Tarak stood still for a while, the heavy suitcase in his hand, looking at the huge building in front of them, an arch of metal and light. The sound of taxi wheels, the voices of the vendors, the echo of footsteps on the marble of the station. Everything made him dizzy. "Do people live here?" he asked softly. "Yes, brother, here," said Sayan, looking around, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. "This is the heart of their world. And it smells of—" He stopped, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "It has life and blood." Tarak turned his head suddenly towards her. There was something old in her voice, a thrill he hadn't heard since the forest. "Don't say that, Sayan. Here you have to be human, just human." She smiled bitterly. "You can take the wolf out of the forest, but not the forest out of his soul." They left the station, pushed by the crowd. The streets of New York were a roller coaster of movement, modern carriages, smoking cars, people in elegant clothes, children running among everyone's feet. Street orchestra was playing, and sirens could be heard from one corner. The illuminated advertisements sparkled in all colors, and the smells changed with each street: perfume, gasoline, warm bread, sweat. For Tarak, the city was a beautiful nightmare. Every building was a mountain, every person seemed a stranger, every corner vibrated with life. His heart was beating fast, as when he heard the howling of wolves, but now it was not a call, but fear. "It's too much," he said. "Too alive." "It's their world," Sayan replied with a fascination mixed with anxiety. "Maybe ours too, if we learn to hide well." On the sidewalk, a young man was selling newspapers. He shouted headlines about crime, about corruption, about a world that seemed to be in constant struggle. Sayan looked carefully at the newspaper page, where a black and white image showed a man in fine clothes. Under the photo it read, "Robert Bobby Caldwell, the new metals magnate in Manhattan." She didn't know why, but that name would be imprinted in her mind. Soon they found John Smith, the American who had brought Tarak here. John was waiting for them in front of the train station, supported by a shiny black car, smoking a cigar. When she saw them, she smiled broadly. "Well, you made it. Welcome to New York." Tarak nodded, not understanding everything, but replied politely, "Thank you for everything." John laughed. "You'll get used to it, my friend. This city eats the weak and feeds the strong. Let's hope you're the second one." When Sayan got out of the taxi, John remained silent for a few moments. Her beauty was not human, her long silver hair like snow, her pale skin, her amber eyes that seemed to see through people. "And who's this angel?" he asked. "My sister, Sayan," Tarak answered in a firm voice. "She's coming with me." John took off his hat, making a slight bow. "Then welcome, Miss Sayan. Hope you like cities." She smiled slightly. "I like their noise, it's like a heart that never sleeps." The car ride to John's blacksmith shop in Brooklyn was an almost mystical experience for both of them. The streets were full of life, people arguing, laughing, running, dogs barking, trams sparkling on the tracks. Giant advertisements lit up the sky like artificial stars, and the skyscrapers shone like metal mountains. Sayan watched everything with wide eyes, but behind the fascination was a restlessness. The city had a strange breath. It pulsed, vibrated, it lived in every noise, in every puff of steam. She could smell blood. It wasn't the raw smell of hunting, but of people greedily devouring each other. "Brother," she said softly, "this city is alive." "Yes," Tarak answered, "but he is not a kind soul." They arrived in an industrial district. John's blacksmith shop was a huge hangar, with brick walls and chimneys that belched black smoke. Inside, sparks danced in the air like falling stars. "This is where you will work, Tarak," said John. "Steel, fire, hammers. It's a world you understand." Tarak entered and felt a familiar thrill. The fire, the smell of molten metal, it was like coming home. Sayan, however, remained at the door, looking around. The street was full of shadows, people hurrying by, faces hidden under hats. A man looked at her intensely, with a cruel smile. "Beautiful doll," he whispered. Sayan held his gaze, spark ignited in her eyes. "I'm not a doll," she said coldly. "I'm something you wouldn't want to know." The man laughed, not understanding the warning. That evening, after John showed him the modest apartment where they would live, Tarak collapsed tiredly onto his bed. "Here we will start a new life," he said. "Maybe this time without blood." But Sayan stood at the window, looking at the city that sparkled below her like a field of artificial stars. "Brother, blood is everywhere. Even in the light." The wind blew through the buildings, bringing with it the sounds of the city, laughter, sirens, footsteps, the roar of engines, and the distance. A white moon slowly rose among the skyscrapers. Sayan closed his eyes, a shiver ran through his body. "Not here," she told herself. "Not now." But the she-wolf in her felt differently. Behind the doors, in the middle of this iron city, her blood and instinct began to boil. Tarak fell asleep, dreaming of the fire of Yaransk and the wolves running through the forest. Sayan lay awake, enveloped in the moonlight that filtered through the window, and its glow, the girl's eyes slowly changed, taking on a hue of molten gold. And the city. A siren wailed in another neighborhood, a dog barked, and in the heart of New York, where the noise never stopped, the white she-wolf slowly raised her head from the shadows, smelling the scent of the new world, a world full of wounds and promises. For the first time since she had left Yaransk, Sayan understood. Here there was no need to look for the hunt in New York. The hunt found you alone. Chapter 5. The Blacksmith in the Bronx. The morning after their arrival, the city had awakened before them. Shouts, engines, footsteps, horns, a symphony of movement, a huge heart that never stopped beating. Tarak looked out the small window of their Bronx apartment, fascinated and troubled at the same time. In Yaransk, morning smelled of wet wood, firewood, and silence. Here, the air was full of dust, steam, and coal smoke. Yet, in that chaos, he felt something familiar, an echo of iron, a call. John Smith came to pick him up just at sunrise. He held his cigar between his fingers, smiling like a man who was sure of himself. "Are you ready, Tarak? I told you the steel here is different. New York has no forests, but it has iron, and you have to tame it." Tarak nodded without saying anything. He had the same calm, hard expression of a man who had braved endless winters. The Bronx blacksmith shop was located on an industrial corner, between two old brick buildings. The chimneys belched thick smoke, and the sound of hammers could be heard all the way to the street. When John opened the metal door, Tarak stood there, the heat, the smell of molten iron, the sound of the fire roaring in the furnaces. It all hit him like a memory. It was as if time was spinning and bringing him back to Yaransk, to his own forge. "This is your place," John said, pointing to a corner of the workshop. There were anvils, pliers, metal bars, and a large hammer with a wooden handle. Tarak touched it respectfully. "Beautiful, it plays well." John laughed. "Does it sing?" "Every hammer has a voice. If you listen to it, you know when the steel is alive." Without saying anything else, Tarak lit the fire. The coals crackled, the flames rose like orange tongues, and soon the metal began to come to life under his blows. The rhythmic sound of the hammer filled the workshop. Everyone present stopped to watch. There was something hypnotic in the way Tarak worked. His blows were not violent, but precise, almost ritualistic. He seemed to dance with the fire, and the metal listened to him. "Damn," muttered an American worker, "this is no ordinary blacksmith. He's a magician." John smiled broadly. "I told you the boy had golden hands. In a week, this workshop would produce the best steel in the Bronx." The days passed. Tarak became a name in the neighborhood. His work was different. The railings were shaped like leaves, the knives seemed alive, and some swore that the shields he forged made strange sounds when they were struck. People came from all corners of the Bronx to see the Siberian blacksmith, as the Americans called him. But for Tarak, it was not gloried. It was worked. It was silenced. In the sound of the fire, he found his peace. Sayan would sometimes come to see him. She would watch him work, his clothes covered in soot and his arms shining with sweat. "You get lost in iron," she would say. "Fire doesn't lie," he answered. "Man does. That's why I prefer to beat steel, not people." She smiled slightly. But behind that smile there was restlessness. The city attracted her and troubled her at the same time. At night, when Tarak slept, Sayan would sneak through the streets. She would blend in the shadows, smelling the alcohol, smoke and desire. The wolf in her was restless. One day, John came to the workshop with an important client, a solid man, in an expensive suit, with a gold watch on his wrist. "Tarak, meet Mr. Caldwell. He needs some special parts for his factory." Tarak looked up and wiped his hands on his apron full of ashes. "Parts for cars?" "For the future," Caldwell said with a cold smile. "America is growing, my friend. Without iron, there is no power." His gaze stopped for a moment on Sayan, who had entered the workshop bringing Tarak lunch. The man's smile lengthened. "Beautiful young lady, is she your wife?" "My sister," Tarak answered shortly. "Ah, and very beautiful." Sayan looked him straight in the eye. "Thank you, sir. But beauty is a weapon, and weapons are not carried in vain." Caldwell laughed, not understanding the depth of the warning. But in Sayan's eyes, for a moment, a golden spark ignited. The days flowed quickly. Tarak worked from dawn to dusk. Each blow of the hammer was a step towards oblivion. Sometimes, when the flames rose too high, he thought he saw the face of 𝖂𝖔𝖊𝖗, the one who had died for his sister. Then he would raise his eyes to the ceiling and whisper, "Forgive her, I couldn't save her, but I will protect her as much as I can." Iron was his confession. Fire, his church. The Bronx had become the new Yaransk, only instead of the wolves of the forest, it now had the wolves of the city. People with fake smiles, with dirty money, with empty souls. One evening, John hurried into the workshop. "Tarak, you have to replace one of the boys. We're going to a port, to a steel shipment. Be careful, that place is not for everyone." Tarak nodded. When they got there, he discovered a hidden world, mobsters, men in black suits, weapons hidden under their clothes. The steel was just a cover. There were deals being made, black money, threats. John whispered to him, "Don't get involved, you're just working for them, nothing more." But Tarak had already noticed the faces. Among them, he recognized the man who had looked at Sayan the day they arrived in New York. "Who is that him?" "His name is Victor, a dangerous guy. He has people all over the Bronx." He didn't look at him too long. Tarak didn't answer. But something in him tensed. He had a feeling that the name would bring blood. In the months that followed, Tarak's name became known not only among the workers, but also among those in the shadows. People said that a Russian blacksmith made weapons that never broke. Some sought him out for money, others for power. Tarak refused all dubious clients. I forge iron, not the fate of people. Sayan looked at him with love, but also with anxiety. Brother, this city will change us. Or we will change him, he said simply. Tonight, however, when the moon rose over the rooftops of the Bronx, she felt the city calling her. Its cry was lost among sirens and howls, and in a world of people, the white wolf was beginning to awaken again. Tarak did not know it yet, but the fire in his workshop was not the only one that lit the night. In the dark corners of the Bronx, other flames were burning, flames of revenge, of blood, of passion. And the blacksmith from the Bronx, the man who came from the snows of Yaransk, would become the witness of a new legend, one born not of ice and fighting, but of fire, steel and blood spilled on the asphalt. New York was a beast that never slept. The noise of cars, the screams of sirens, the late laughter of those who got lost in the clubs, all melted into a shrill symphony that pressed against Sayan's temples. From the small window of their Bronx apartment, the woman looked at the infinite lights of the city, that ocean of sparkles that seemed like the stars of another world. The day was beautiful, foreign, of an almost painful grace. But at night, the night was a different story. Tarak, busy at the blacksmith shop, found solace in work. Fire and metal kept him connected to the present. Sayan, however, could not stay still. The city called to her. She felt its pulse under her skin, like a tremor that made her tremble. So one evening, without telling her brother, she put on a thin coat and set off on the streets lit by neon signs. The air smelled of burnt oil, rain and sin. Women laughed falsely on the corners, men smoked in the shadows, and from the bars came jazz songs and the clink of glasses. Sayan walked among them with an almost unreal grace, like a being pulled from a dream. Her amber eyes, which seemed to glow in the darkness, attracted glances. People turned without knowing why. There was something about her walk, a dangerous elegance, a beauty that attracted you like a flame. And the flame burns not only wood, but also the soul of the one who touches it. In a bar on the corner of a side street, a man noticed her, Vincent Russo, a local undercover, with a reputation for smiling only when someone is suffering. Had gray eyes, cold as steel, and a calculating smile, sat at a table in the back, a cigar lit and 2 bodyguards at his side. When Sayan entered, the conversation stopped for a moment. All eyes turned to her. Even the music seemed to be left, leaving only her light footsteps on the wooden floor. "Who is this lost angel?" Vincent asked, without taking his eyes off her. "I haven't seen her before, boss," said one of his men. "She looks new from this side." Vincent smiled. "Then let's welcome her to hell." He stood up and approached the bar. Taking 2 glasses, he offered her one. "Gin. Or something stronger." "I don't drink," Sayan answered calmly, in a low voice. "Then why did you come here? You don't seem like the type to seek street company." She looked him straight in the eye. "Maybe I missed the noise. Silence is dangerous." Vincent laughed. "Silence only kills the weak." "You don't seem weak." Sayan didn't answer. Her eyes shone strangely, like 2 semi-transparent stones reflecting the fire behind the bar. Vincent had studied her long enough. There was something different about this woman. She wasn't just beautiful, she was mysterious, unsettling, like an enigma that promised pleasure and death alike. "What's your name, beautiful one?" "Sayan." "Beautiful name. Sounds foreign." "So do I," she said simply, turning to the door. Vincent watched her leave, his smile turning into a cold cut. "Sayan, I'll see you again, beautiful one." "In the following evenings," Sayan returned. Maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of that dangerous thrill that kept her alive. Vincent invited her to dinner, listened to her speak with her strange accent, looked at her with fascination. She, in turn, was intrigued by him. She felt in that man the same wild force that she carried. Only in him, the instinct was not natural, but built from power, money, and violence. Tarak knew nothing. When he came home, he found her silent, thoughtful, saying only that she had been walking. But his nights were increasingly restless. Sometimes, he thought he heard her leaving. Other times, that a distant scream could be heard in the street. Vincent Russo was not the kind of man who was content to just watch point one evening. He invited her to his place. His Manhattan villa was full of mirrors, paintings, and the smell of expensive perfume. Sayan enters without fear. "The beauty of Siberia," he said. "I want to know everything about you. They don't talk about me. They feel it." Vincent smiled. Approaching, he touched her hair, and his cold fingers made it to startle. "Don't be afraid that I don't bite." "But I do," she whispered. Her eyes sparkled for a moment in an inhuman way, and Vincent took a step back, laughing. "You have the look of an animal, you know that?" "Maybe because animals don't lie." That he grabbed her arm. "Then never lie to me, Sayan. I hate lying, I hate chains," she said coldly, pulling her arm back. For the first time, Vincent felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Not much, but enough to unsettle him. After a few weeks, the world around them had become a spider's web. Sayan came and went as she pleased, and Vincent began to become obsessed. He sent her expensive clothes, jewelry, asked her to sit next to him at parties. For him, she was a trophy. For her, a cage. Chapter 6. The Fall. The city seemed to transform when Sayan stepped into Vincent Russo's world, and the cold light of Manhattan. The skyscrapers shone like daggers, and the streets were full of shadows that moved quickly, like hurried ghosts. For Sayan, at first, everything seemed fascinating. Huge buildings, limousines that passed without respecting traffic lights, people in expensive suits and perfumes that made you dizzy. Vincent knew how to create a perfect illusion. Luxury was a veil that hid terror, and the first days, she let herself be carried away by promises. Jewelry, expensive clothes, dinners in extravagant restaurants, everything was thrown in front of her, like a poisoned apple. Vincent told her that he offered her a carefree life, far from the cold of Siberia and the poverty of the Bronx. Sayan, having no experience with the modern world, felt the temptation like a fire that spread slowly but surely in her chest. Tarak observed the change from a distance, but he could not intervene. His attempts to explain the dangers seemed insignificant in front of the brilliance that Vincent offered. Sayan, who had been strong and independent until then, gradually allowed herself to be blinded by the glamour. She thought she could maintain control, but the reality was different. Vincent's world was seductive and dangerous at the same time. The clubs he brought her to were full of people who sold their souls for money and power. There, Sayan quickly began to learn the unwritten rules. Whoever refuses the pleasure of the rich pays with pain. Whoever does not accept, disappears. One night, one of Vincent's bodyguards showed her the true face of the world she had entered. A young woman was being pulled by the hair and dragged into a back room, under the indifferent eyes of those present. Sayan trembled, but at the same time she felt a strange thrill. Fear and adrenaline, they amplified her senses. Vincent was a master of manipulation. He would offer her moments of affection, fake smiles, and then throw her into humiliating situations, alternating between privilege and terror. Sayan began to be used as an entertainment trophy for his influential friends, to dance in exclusive clubs, to show off, to be admired and then judged. With every step, her freedom diminished. The jewels sparkled, but there were invisible chains that bound her to Vincent. One evening, after a lavish event, Vincent pulled her into a private room. Glasses of champagne, scented candles, and expensive furniture, everything created the illusion of a dream life. But once the door closed, his face changed. The smile disappeared, and his gaze turned cold. "Have you forgotten who you really are?" he said, lightly touching her cheek with his palm. "No, no," Sayan replied in a trembling voice. "Then it's time to learn," he said, smiling bitterly. Days and nights were beginning to merge for Sayan. Luxury and pleasure were followed by violence and humiliation in clubs. Foreign men looked at her as an object, and she had no choice but to smile and accept. In Vincent's office, someone raised their voice, someone else insulted her, and she had to keep quiet. This reality began to slowly but surely grind on her and the mirror of her apartment in Moscow. "Excuse me," in New York, she saw the transformation. Her face, once calm and imposing, had become a mixture of fatigue, fear, and the desire to survive. In her eyes, you could read the struggle between who she was and who she had to be in order to survive in this dark world. Sayan tried to talk to Tarak, but she felt guilty and ashamed. She was hiding the truth from him about her nights, about the humiliations experienced and the fear that gnawed at her. Tarak felt that something was wrong, but nothing had prepared him for the gravity of the situation. Vincent, intelligent and dangerous, already had her completely in his net. Any attempt to escape was prevented by psychological control, gifts that made her feel obligated, subtle but clear threats, and the promise of a normal life if she accepted the rules of the game. Sayan, caught between the desire for freedom and the seduction of luxury, began to accept the role that Vincent imposed. What had been a world of opportunity for her had turned into a labyrinth of invisible steel. Her freedom was only a distant dream, and every wrong step could bring her pain or even death. All that remained was the power of instinct and latent anger, a deep-seated, yet still, secret, ready to erupt. Meanwhile, Tarak, in his Bronx studio, felt the presence of a shadow he could not see. He knew that his sister, the woman with the amber eyes, could not be completely lost. But he did not know that the fight for Sayan was only beginning. Her fall into the dark world of Vincent Russo was only the first act of a destiny that would defy the laws of reality and the moon that never disappears. Sayan remained trapped between light and darkness, between the desire to survive and the instinct that transformed her into what no one could control, a free animal, even if momentarily captive. And deep in her soul, a thought persisted, hidden and angry. The moon never disappears, and she would return to illuminate the darkness that surrounded her. In this world of luxury and violence, Sayan had begun to understand the price of freedom. And the price was greater than she had imagined. Chapter 7. The Night of the She-Wolf. New York City had fallen asleep under a full moon that cast a cold, silver light over the skyscrapers, streets, and parks. In an apartment on the Upper East Side, Sayan stood motionless by the wide-open window. Her amber eyes sparkled in the moonlight, and her breathing was deeper, heavier, as if something inside her was awakening. Ancient instincts, inherited from bloodlines that people did not understand, had begun to overwhelm her. That night, the woman had become something else, a being between two worlds. A white she-wolf who could not be kept in cages. Vincent Russo, in his luxurious office, suspected nothing. He believed that his absolute control over Sayan was still intact. He had risen from his huge bed to give her final instructions, like a master leading his puppets. But as he approached the apartment, he felt a strange, wild smell that made his skin wrinkle. Finally, before he could knock on the door, Sayan, in her white she-wolf form, emerged from the shadows of the room with incredible speed. Her piercing golden eyes reflected the hatred accumulated over the years. The first attack was lightning fast. Vincent didn't even have time to scream. Sayan, with her powerful claws and the agility of a true predator, knocked him down instantly. The air in the room was filled with screams, whimpers, and the smell of blood. But this was just the beginning. She felt every lie, every betrayal, every moment of humiliation she had been forced to endure. Her primal instinct demanded revenge, and on this night, no one could stand in her way. Stepping out into the street, Sayan felt the city pulse around her. The tall buildings, the fast-moving cars, and the neon lights were no longer simple objects. They had become obstacles and targets on every corner. People who had participated, directly or indirectly, in her suffering became victims of her savage rage. Her claws made a metallic noise on the cold asphalt, and her screams rang out like a warning to the entire world. The first group of thugs, the men who had sold her and humiliated her, had no chance. Sayan followed them with precision and fury. Every move was calculated, yet instinctual. This transformation wasn't just physical, it was emotional and psychological. Sayan had become the perfect instrument of savage justice, cruel, relentless, and unforgiving. Sayan took revenge on the streets. Tarak, who worked in his Bronx workshop, felt a deep unease. An old instinct, a blood bond he had never been able to deny, made him look up to the sky. The full moon looked down at him, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. He didn't know what was happening exactly, but he felt that his sister was involved. That night, Sayan did not stop until each person responsible for her pain had been defeated. Vincent Russo had fallen first, a symbol of the domination and cruelty that had been imposed on him. The rest of the group, which had controlled prostitution and violence, had no escape. Sayan had become a force of nature, a chaos controlled by a wolf's mind. The usually bustling streets of New York were now a hunting ground for an unstoppable creature. After the last victim fell, Sayan felt a deep emptiness. Vengeance was complete, but the price of transformation was high. Her body trembled, her mind exhausted by the intensity of the night. She retreated to a secluded spot, in a park on the banks of the East River, where moonlight caressed her white fur. Her instincts gradually subsided, and her body began to become the woman the world had known. Beautiful, but with eyes now more piercing than ever. Tarak arrived a few minutes later. He found his sister lying on the grass, transformed back into human form, her clothes torn and an air of victory and pain mixed together. Without speaking, he felt the weight of the night, the cruelty of justice, the need for protection, and the immensity of the power that Sayan had carried within her. "The moon doesn't disappear anywhere," he muttered, looking at the sky. "And I will never forget," Sayan replied, her voice trembling but determined. That night became Sayan's personal legend, the night of the she-wolf who brought justice in her wild style. And the world of New York, a new balance had been born. The woman between two worlds had learned to combine instinct with reason, and Tarak realized that he would need all his skill and patience to help her navigate between man and she-wolf. And the following days, the city still trembled from the traces of the crime. The police searched for clues, the underworld disappeared, and the myth of the moon that brought a merciless hunt began to take shape. For Sayan, however, this was not just a night of revenge, but the beginning of a path that he would learn to control, a struggle between humanity and wilderness, between light and darkness, between life and instincts that cannot be completely mastered. New York City, York was slowly waking up after a night full of chaos, and the first rays of sunlight were filtering through the gray and ashen skyscrapers, reflecting on the wet asphalt. The streets were still full of echoes. The screams of the previous night seemed to vibrate in every corner, and the smell of fresh blood remained impregnated in the air. The local newspapers did not stop publishing articles about a white beast that roamed the city, killing without mercy, and who had managed to escape from every police trap. Each title was more sensational than the previous one. The she-wolf of Manhattan, the monster under the moon, the white hunt of revenge, or the night of blood on the streets. Tarak was in John's studio in the Bronx, and although the world seemed to be functioning normally around him, a cold shiver ran through his body. The smell of burning iron in the workshop no longer had the power to calm him. Instead, another smell, the smell of blood, awakened all his instincts. Tarak closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. It was a smell he had known since he was a child. It was the sign of the she-wolf. The sign of his sister. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice trembling. But the signs were obvious. The claw marks on the asphalt, the bloodstains reflecting the bright morning light, the marks of battle on the fences and walls of the buildings, all indicated her presence. This was not newspaper fiction. This was not an urban legend. It was Sayan, the she-wolf who had come out to get justice after being sold and humiliated. Tarak felt a deep fear, not for himself, but for his sister. He knew that her power was immense, but the sword of wild instinct was even more dangerous. In his heart, he felt that he could no longer intervene directly, that he could not stop her without being caught in the vortex of her violence. He sat at the workbench, trembling slightly, wringing his hands, looking at the hammers, anvils and sparks flying in the workshop. All of this seemed irrelevant now in the face of the chaos unfolding in the city. Tarak silently prayed to the spirit for his sister's protection. His thoughts returned to their childhood in Yaransk. He remembered the cold nights when Sayan wandered through the forest, and he had to protect her from the wind, from predators, from the darkness. He remembered Ilya's sacrifices and the day their entire world had changed, the day the light had been overshadowed by pain and loss. Those memories made him understand better the nature of the she-wolf: anger, a desire for justice, and an inability to obey humans. Tarak felt he had to do something, but every step seemed risky. He feared that if he intervened too soon, he might cause a greater tragedy. Still, his helplessness tore at him. He imagined his sister's amber eyes, piercing and angry, shining in the light. The moon, the eyes that spoke to him without words: "Understand me or you will regret it." That morning, the newspapers continued to publish photographs of the street where the last victims had been. You could see the claw marks on the asphalt, the blood spatters and the panic of the witnesses. Each headline made Tarak feel more deeply the need to protect the city and, especially, to protect Sayan. He realized that the world could not understand what was happening. It was not just crime. It was pure instinct, savage justice, a force that transcended the laws of Men. As he walked through the streets, Tarak felt how the city seemed to tense under the gaze of the moon that still flickered in the sky. He felt how all the traces were connected in an invisible thread, all the crimes, all the screams, all the fears of the witnesses. And he realized that this fight was only the beginning. The spirit of the she-wolf could not be stopped, but perhaps it could be guided. "Please, spirit of the forest and the moon, help her not to get lost," Tarak whispered, his eyes fixed on the sky. The noise of cars, the rustling of newspapers, and the cries of people now seemed like a backdrop to his thoughts. Tarak knew that no matter how hard she tried to hide, the wolf's instinct was unstoppable. Sayan was not just his sister, she was a force of nature, and every full moon night would bring blood to the asphalt until she learned to control her instincts. That winter morning, York felt the presence of a creature that did not belong in the world of humans, and Tarak silently swore to himself that he would be by Sayan's side, that he would seek any way to protect her and transform her rage into a constructive force. For the first time, he understood that the real fight was not against the world, but against his own wildness that defined Sayan. Chapter 8. The Reunion. The noise of the city seemed to have disappeared for Tarak that evening. The streets of New York, usually full of lights, cars and horns, were now only shadows that trickled across the wet walls and sidewalks. The cold evening air penetrated his thick clothes, but it did not really touch him. His entire body was gripped by a deep tension, an instinct that called him to his sister, Sayan. He felt her presence before he saw her, a dense energy of blood and fear that poured like a shock wave through the concrete of the city. Tarak hurried through the dark buildings, his steps measured, feeling every vibration of the asphalt beneath the soles of his boots. The signs were clear to him: bloodstains, claw marks on the walls, and the edge of a basement that hid the tragedy of the night. When he reached the basement door, 𝖭𝖏 hesitated for a moment. He remembered their childhood in Yaransk, the cold nights when Sayan hid in the forest, and he was the only one who could protect her. The same memories hit him with intensity: her crystalline laughter, her wild courage, but also the vulnerability that made her so human. 𝖭𝖏 pushed the door carefully and looked into the darkness. Under the pale light that filtered through a small window, Sayan was there, crouched on the floor. Her white hair shone faintly, contrasting with her bloody clothes. Her face was covered in battle marks, and her eyes sparkled with tears and anger. In her hands she held what seemed to be the remains of what had been her fight from the previous night. "Sayan," 𝖭𝖏 whispered, his voice broken, slowly approaching. She looked up at him, and for a moment, she was no longer the woman who roamed the streets of the city with her deadly beauty. She was the she-wolf, a wild force, unbridled, but exhausted, with her white fur tight with blood and her eyes full of despair. "Brother," she murmured, her voice trembling. "I can't escape. The city has become my forest." 𝖭𝖏 felt his heart jump in his chest. He understood her words perfectly. For Sayan, the city was not just a place. It was a concrete jungle of danger, of people who had tried to subjugate and humiliate her. Every corner, every street was now a hunting ground, and her she-wolf instinct had been fully activated. "You are not alone, Sayan," 𝖭𝖏 said, sitting down next to her. "I am here. I will help you." Sayan leaned on his shoulder, crying in a whisper, and 𝖭𝖏 felt her trembling. Tears and blood mixed, and the smell of iron and wild animal filled the basement. It was a smell that defined his sister, a mixture of beauty, anger, and pain. "You must control this anger," 𝖭𝖏 told him, his voice calm but firm. "You cannot let your instincts consume you. That is not how you will survive here." Sayan looked at him with red eyes, drowning in tears, and asked, "But what if I don't want to survive by the rules, brother? What if I want to do justice my way?" 𝖭𝖏 took a deep breath. He knew he couldn't stop her completely, that the wolf in her was too strong to be soothed by words. But he also knew he had to protect her, to guide her. The plan was already forming in his mind. The help of a healer, a potion, a ritual that would allow her to control her transformation and her rage. "We will find a way, Sayan," he whispered. "You don't have to wander alone in the darkness. We will do this together." She lay down next to him, leaning on his arm, and for a moment, New York seemed to disappear. It was no longer the concrete jungle, no longer the streets full of danger and crime. It was just the two of them, brothers bound by blood and destiny, facing a wolf who needed guidance. "If it weren't for you, brother," Sayan whispered, "I don't know what would have happened to me. I don't know what I would have done without you, Sayan," 𝖭𝖏 replied. "But that doesn't matter now. You're here. We're together." The basement became a temporary sanctuary, a place where pain and anger could be faced but not destroyed. 𝖭𝖏 felt his responsibility grow, not just as a brother, but as a protector, as a guide to a being torn between man and wolf. That night, 𝖭𝖏 and Sayan stood side by side, and New York around them continued to breathe. But in their hearts, a powerful force, a bond of blood and destiny, was beginning to transform chaos into strategy, rage into control. The she-wolf was no longer just a creature of instinct. She was a child of the night learning to survive among humans. And finally, 𝖭𝖏 felt there was hope. Sayan was no longer wandering alone. She was safe, at least for the moment. Chapter 9, The Oath. Night lay over New York like a sea of shadows and smoke. The buildings seemed like black cliffs where the lights were only the eyes of a sleeping beast. And the basement of the blacksmith shop, two souls were binding their destinies for the second time, not in the frozen snows of Yaransk, but under the incessant noise of the city that never slept. 𝖭𝖏 stood by the small fire of the workshop, sparks jumping from the anvil like lost stars. In that oppressive silence, he looked at Sayan. Her silver hair fell over her shoulders, stained with smoke and blood, and her amber eyes, once full of life, were now tired deep, like those of a being who had carried the weight of worlds on her shoulders. "Brother," she said in a barely audible voice, "how much longer can we run? Wherever we go, the curse follows us and the forests, in the villages, now in the cities." Tarak did not answer immediately. He put down his hammer, taking a deep breath, as if he wanted to gather the power of the entire universe into a single word. "We do not run, Sayan, we do not run anymore. This time we will face everything. Together." His words were simple but heavy. They were a promise he had never made to anyone. In Yaransk he had once sworn not to raise iron against nature, but now in front of his sister, the oaths changed. He was no longer just the village blacksmith, he was the guardian of a being between worlds. Sayan looked at him for a long time. Tarak's face was carved with fatigue, but his eyes had that warm human light, the same one that had saved her from the clutches of madness in the past. "And if there is no way, brother? And if the she-wolf is me forever?" Tarak took a step towards her, took her cold hands in his, and answered her with a trembling but determined voice. "Then we will learn to live with it. I don't want to lose you again." Sayan. A shiver ran through the room. The sparks in the fire rose, as if answering their oath. At that moment, Sayan felt that her brother was speaking not just as a man, but as a part of her, from that fragile balance between wolf and human being. "Tell me, Tarak, how can you still believe in salvation? You, who have seen how love dies, how fire swallows everything, how curses do not forgive." He smiled, a sad but warm smile. "Because I saw you rise from the ashes. Because when everyone else ran from you, I stayed. And because somewhere, deep inside you, there is still that Sayan who laughed in the snow, who painted dreams on the walls of our hut in Yaransk." The words broke Sayan. Tears filled her eyes, and her soul, so tired of fighting, began to waver between anger and the desire to believe again. "Brother," she whispered, kneeling by the fire, "I don't want to kill anymore. I don't want to hear my scream in the night anymore. But when the moon rises, I'm no longer me." Tarak leaned down and placed a hand on her head, like when they were children. "Then I will hold your hand until morning, Sayan. And if you forget who you are, I will remember you." The silence that followed was heavy, but full of meaning. The fire crackled, and somewhere in the distance the rumble of trains could be heard. The city lived, regardless of their promises, but in that small workshop in the Bronx, a new world was taking shape, one where hope was not an illusion, but a sword forged from faith. Tarak stood up and approached the small window. He looked up at the moonlit sky. "See, Sayan. Even through the walls and smoke, the moon still finds us. You can't run from it, but you can face it. We will find a cure. We will go where we need to, even to the edges of the world, if necessary." Sayan stood up slowly. The firelight enveloped her like an aura. For a moment, it seemed that the she-wolf in her was listening. "I swear, Tarak," she said, "I swear that you will not leave me alone, not when the moon calls me, not when the blood takes over me." He placed his hand over her heart and said slowly, with the gravity of an ancestral covenant, "I swear by the fire that gave birth to us and the iron that nourished me, I swear by our blood, Sayan, I will not leave you. We will break the curse, even if it means defying the gods." Sayan closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks. She felt a strange peace take hold of her. The anger, the bloodlust, the shadows that had tormented her for so many nights were receding little by little. In her brother's arms, the she-wolf was silent. That night, Tarak forged a simple amulet from iron. It was not a magical talisman, but he made it with his own hands, blowing prayers into the hot iron in the ancient language of their ancestors. When he put it in Sayan's hand, he said to her, "It's not magic. But it's my promise, as long as you wear this, you will know I'm close, even when you can't see me. She hugged it to her chest, and her eyes filled with light. It's enough, brother. For the first time, it's enough. Outside, the wind whistled through the deserted streets, and in the distance, a siren howled, and its echo seemed to answer the call of a beast that still lived deep within her soul. But in that moment, Sayan was no longer alone. Their oath had been sealed, a pact born of love, pain, and hope. It was no longer just a covenant between two brothers, but a defiance of fate itself. The white she-wolf of Yaransk now had a new path. And even though the city was a concrete forest, and the moon a cold eye above the world, a flame had been ignited in their hearts that neither curse nor time could extinguish. That night, the fire in Tarak's workshop burned brighter than ever. Sparks rose into the dark sky, like small stars that refused to die, signs of a new beginning, born from the ashes of the past. Chapter 10. The Businessman. As the days passed, New York seemed to become a living labyrinth of sounds and shadows for Sayan. The city pulsed, breathed, and groaned under the weight of millions of footsteps, and she, the wolf woman, floated among the people like a beautiful and restless phantom. After her oath to Tarak, Sayan struggled to keep her curse in check. Tonight she would lock herself in her room, looking at the moon through the thin curtains, fighting the call of the animal within her. But during the day she felt the need to be someone else. One rainy morning, while Tarak worked in his studio in the Bronx, Sayan walked along Fifth Avenue, lost in the noise of streetcars, car horns, and people hurrying with their black umbrellas. Her simple clothes and graceful gait attracted attention. There was something about the way she walked, a silent nobility, a wild force tamed with difficulty. The rain wets her silver hair, but she doesn't seem to care. In a moment of inattention, a polished black car almost hits her. The driver brakes suddenly, and the back door opens. A man in a three-piece suit gets out of the car, his gaze sharp, used to commanding. He was about 40 years old, with firm features and an air of natural strength. His blue eyes, cold and clear, measure her from head to toe. "Madam, are you okay?" he asks, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle. Sayan nods, slightly dizzy. The man looks at her for a long moment, as if something inside her has taken his breath away. "I apologize, my driver wasn't paying attention. Let me take you home." "No need," she replies. "I don't live far," he insists, and his gaze is not one of curiosity, but of pure fascination. It was as if he recognized her from a dream. "My name is Bobby Turner," he says, extending his hand to her. "I am the owner of Turner Steel Corporation." "And you, ma'am?" "Sayan," she answers simply, without a last name, without a past. He smiles, and in that moment, a strange spark is born between them, not one of simple desire, but of recognition, as if two opposite worlds had looked at each other for the first time in a mirror. Bobby invites her for coffee, and the luxurious cafe where he takes her, Sayan seems like a lost creature from another era. Every gesture of hers is natural, but loaded with mystery. She speaks little, listens a lot. He tells her about his factories, about the city that never sleeps, about the power to shape metal, about how steel is the blood of modern America. When Sayan hears him talk about iron, her eyes light up. She remembers Tarak, the fire of Yaransk, the sparks that danced in the night. For a moment, the past and the present touch. "My brother works with iron," she says softly, with a barely there smile. "Then he's a man of honor," Bobby replies, looking at her with growing curiosity. In the days that follow, Bobby Turner seeks her out again, sends a carriage to Tarak's workshop, under the pretext that he needs repairs on a metal part. Tarak, surprised, looks at his sister, who blushes without knowing why. "Who is this man, Sayan?" he asks. "A friend, I think," she answers. Tarak sighs. That tone reminds her of Iliad, of another man who had loved her, without knowing that love for a cursed woman always leads to death. But Bobby is not like the others. In his presence, Sayan feels an unexpected peace. This man does not see her as prey or an enigma, but as a woman with a hidden strength. He invites her to evenings, to dinners, introduces her to his brilliant world. Under the light of the chandeliers and the sound of jazz, Sayan becomes an apparition. White dresses, jasmine perfume, discreet smiles. But every evening when she returns home, she looks in the mirror and sees in her eyes the reflection of the she-wolf lurking under her skin. Tarak notices the change. Be careful, Sayan. The light of the city is no less dangerous than the shadow of the forest, he tells her one evening. Maybe. But it's the only light in which I'm not cold, she answers, looking at him sadly. The love between her and Bobby grows like a flame that cannot be hidden. He overwhelms her with attention, takes her to his mansion on the banks of the Hudson. There, Sayan discovers the tranquility of a life that seems almost human. The days pass in peace, and at night, when the moon rises, she hides in her room, trembling, fighting not to give in. But Bobby feels that something is wrong. One night, he finds her crying, her gaze lost in the moonlit window. What's wrong with you, my love? He asks, touching her hand. Sayan looks at him with that deep pain that no longer has words. Nothing, Bobby. Just the shadows of the past. He hugs her. He doesn't understand, but he feels that this woman is not like the others. She is like a force of nature, beautiful, dangerous, and impossible to possess. As he falls asleep, she goes out into the garden. The sky is clear, and the full moon slowly rises, like a white eye over the modern world. Sayan feels her blood boiling. Her mouth goes dry, her skin tightens, and her breathing becomes labored. But she holds on, she fights, she digs her nails into her palm until blood flows through her fingers. Not now, not here, she tells herself. Tarak's voice echoes in her mind. You can't run from who you are. You can only choose who you hurt. Sayan falls to her knees in the snow, tears mingling with the blood, but she manages to keep her nature hidden. In the morning, Bobby finds her sleeping in the garden, dressed only in her white shirt, wet with dew. You are like no other, he tells her in amazement, covering her with a blanket. She smiles weakly. If you only knew. In the days that follow, their world becomes a strange story between love and mystery. He looks at her as a miracle, a woman who appeared out of nowhere and changed his life. But she knows that she lives on the edge of the abyss, between the desire to be a woman and the call of blood. When she takes him to meet Tarak for the first time, the brother realizes immediately. Bobby Turner truly loves her. But Tarak's eyes see something else. The future. A future that smells of fire, steel, and curse. After Bobby leaves, Tarak tells his sister, You have entered a world that will never understand you, Sayan. If he will truly love you, he must know who you are. Sayan is silent. He knows that he is right, but he cannot. How could she tell a man that the woman she holds in her arms turns into a white beast at night, howling at the moon and tasting blood? Deep down, part of her heart wants to believe that love can break the curse. The other knows that love, most of the time, strengthens it. But in a city where iron and blood intertwine, nothing is impossible. That evening, Sayan looks at the moon again, and in her eyes she sees a new light, not just that of a she-wolf, but of a woman who, for the first time, dares to hope. Because maybe, just maybe, businessman Bobby Turner was no coincidence. Maybe it was the forest spirit's final test, to see if love can survive in the heart of a monster. Chapter 11. The Glass Marriage. New York shone under the rain of electric light, like a giant jewel thrown into the night. The streets were bustling, the horns mixed with the laughter of passers-by, and the shop windows reflected hurried faces and unknown stories. In this city that never sleeps, a fairy tale wedding was about to take place, a wedding that, to many, seemed detached from a modern story of love and destiny. Bobby Turner, the steel magnate, was about to marry a mysterious woman who had appeared as if from nowhere. No one knew much about her past. She was beautiful, but not in the ordinary sense of the word. There was something in her eyes, a mystery that made the world silent. When she smiled, men forgot their words, and women felt a cold shiver, like when you get too close to a flame. For Sayan, every day before the wedding was a step on a path that she didn't know if she could follow to the end. In Bobby's eyes, she saw the hope of a new, clean, human life. But in her own eyes, which she avoided in the mirror, the shadow of the she-wolf was still hidden. The curse had not disappeared. The spirit of the forest was silent, and his silence terrified her more than any warning. In the morning of their engagement, Bobby gave her a diamond ring with a blue stone, deep and clear as the winter sky. He believed that the stone reflected the purity of their love. She saw in it the mirror of a prison. Sayan, he had told her with a sincere smile, "You are all I have been missing. My world of steel, numbers and business has been filled with life since I met you." She had listened to him, trembling. Every word he said sounded like a call to a normal life, but every heartbeat reminded her that normality was not made for her. And yet, the desire to believe was stronger than fear. The wedding took place in an old cathedral in Manhattan, where stained glass windows colored the light in red, blue and gold. Every step Sayan took on the red carpet echoed another world: forests, howls, ice and blood. Her dress, of white silk and lace, seemed to burn in the sunlight. Tarak, dressed simply, stood behind, watching the ceremony with moist eyes. When the priest said the vows, Sayan felt a knot in her neck. "I promised to love him in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow." The words burned her lips. What kind of love could a beast offer? What kind of life could someone living between two worlds promise? But Bobby looked at her with such confidence that he said, "Yes," in a trembling voice, as if he were saying a prayer. People applauded. Bells rang out over the city, and the newspapers wrote about the wedding of the year. Turner Steel now had a queen, a woman with an unknown past, but with an elegance that eclipsed everything. And the first weeks, their life was a dream. Bobby adored her. He bought her rare flowers, played the piano for her in the evenings, talked to her about his plans for the future: a new factory, an orphanage, an art foundation. Sayan listened to him and marveled at how much light could exist in a man. He, the man of steel, seemed to carry a pure soul within himself. She, the woman between the worlds, felt more and more dirty. Tonight, however, the curse remembered her. One night with a full moon, he got out of bed and she walked to the window. She looked at the city, its lights, like fallen stars, and the mirror of the sky. The moon looked at her in silence. Her hands began to tremble. Her nails turned black, her breathing quickened. She bit her lip until it bled, trying to stop. But she couldn't. She ran to the bathroom, turned on the tap, put her hands under cold water. Nothing. The fire was inside her. The she-wolf was waking up. She hid in the basement, locked herself in and collapsed on the floor. The howl escaped between her teeth, muffled, but loud enough for a dog on the street to answer her. In the morning she woke up naked, covered in dirt and scratches. In her palm she had a torn piece of cloth, a man's shirt. With her heart beating them madly, he went up to the bedroom. Bobby was sleeping peacefully. She looked at him and a tear slid down her cheek. "I'm going to destroy you," she whispered. In the following days, she began to hide more. She told him she was sick, that she needed rest. He believed her and protected her. He brought her doctors, flowers, read her poems. The more he loved her, the more Sayan feared her. Tarak, who now lived near their mansion, saw the change. He came one evening, without announcing it. "You're still fighting with her, aren't you?" Sayan shook his head, crying silently. I can't anymore, Tarak, that I love him. And that's why I'm going to lose him. He grabbed her hands, dirt from the ground. The curse doesn't break with love, Sayan.That it breaks with truth. If he finds out, he'll hate me, she whispered. Or he'll save you, Tarak told her. But you can't live between lies and the full moon. Sayan was silent. She knew her brother was right. But she also knew that Bobby wasn't ready to know the whole truth, so she chose to remain silent, to play the role of the perfect woman, the loving wife, the Mrs. Turner. Every night at dinner, she smiled for the photographers, danced in her husband's arms and watched the world applaud her. But beyond the smile, another light burned in her eyes, one that came from beyond. Civilization, reporter wrote in a fashionable chronicle. Sayan.Turner is like an ice flower, beautiful but untouchable. Her gaze is an enigma that even the bravest man would not want to solve. No one suspected how true those words were. One night Bobby found her crying again. This time he didn't ask anything, he just held her tightly in his arms, and she pressed her ear to his chest, listening to her heartbeat. For you, he said to himself, I will find a way. Even if I have to get lost. The next day, Bobby gave her a surprise. He showed her a glass pavilion, built especially for her, on the roof of the mansion. Here, my love, you will be able to look at the moon without being cold, he said to her with a smile. When she entered there, the sunlight refracted into thousands of colors, like in a dream. But the next night, when the moon rose, the glass walls became mirrors, and Sayan saw herself reflected 100 times. Woman, wolf, woman, wolf. She fell to her knees and howled silently. Her marriage was a miracle to the world, but for her it had become a beautiful cage, a glass marriage, in which every smile was a crack, every love, a sword stuck in the soul. And yet, deep in that transparent prison, a part of her was beginning to believe that Bobby's love could, one day, melt even the coldest of curses. Chapter 12. The First Night of Love. Evening had descended on the Turner mansion like a blessing. Beyond the huge windows, the city melted into an ocean of lights, and the full moon, white and gentle, floated over the skyscrapers like a silent eye of the sky and the vast room, covered with heavy velvet curtains. Sayan stood in front of the mirror. Her wedding dress, scattered on the floor, resembled a trace of melted snow. It was the first night after the wedding. The first night in which the wolf woman was in the arms of a man who loved her. Without fear. Bobby, with his serene eyes, approached slowly, as if he had stepped into a sanctuary. He did not know what secret her heart held, but he felt around her something more than beauty, an ancient, wild, almost sacred force. You are like the moon, he whispered to her, so close and yet so far away. His words trembled in her soul. For a moment, Sayan had feared that the moonlight would reveal her true nature. But that evening, the curse seemed asleep, caught between the lines of destiny and the song of the heart. When Bobby touched her hands, Sayan felt the world around her disappear. Her body, always caught between two realities, calmed down. Her breathing mixed with his, and for the first time, she did not feel the fear of the she-wolf, but the peace of the woman. That night, within the silent walls of the mansion, a bond was being made that defied the laws of the world, the fusion of man and beast, flesh and spirit. For Bobby, it was love in its purest form, trust. For Sayan, it was a temporary deliverance, an illusion that she could only be a woman without fangs, without a howl. The moon rose above the city, and shadows moved on the walls like ghosts. Sayan feared that at some point, the light would trigger the transformation. But the curse remained silent, as if the spirit of the forest itself were watching over them. Their bodies approached with a ritual delicacy. Tea was not a union of desire, but of souls. Bobby caressed her as if it was something sacred, and she looked at him with eyes that held the auroral light of the north. And that touch, Sayan felt the beast in her retreat, ashamed and defeated by love. The night became endless. The words faded away, leaving only the breaths, the heartbeats and the smell of fire and warm skin. Each moment seemed suspended in a time that no longer belonged to the world. As dawn approached, Sayan fell asleep on Bobby's chest. For the first time in her life, her sleep was not haunted by dreams, but by silence, and that silence, deep within her body, another destiny was beginning to take root. A child. In the morning, the pale sunlight penetrated through the curtains. Bobby slept peacefully, with the smile of a man who believes he has achieved complete happiness. Sayan slowly got up, covering herself with the white sheet and the mirror. She saw her face, not that of the she-wolf, but of a woman who, for a moment, was loved unconditionally. She touched her abdomen, feeling a mystery there, a new life, a beginning. But fear was also born in her gaze. She knew that the wolf's blood flowed through her, and the child carried within him a part of that heritage. What if the curse had awakened again? What if the baby had been the sign of a new she-wolf, or perhaps of a new wolf? Tarak, her brother, was not to know. Nor Bobby, the man who loved her with an innocence that would have died at the first shadow of truth, so she chose silence. The days that followed were a mixture of happiness and guilt. Sayan laughed, cooked, danced, braided her hair like an ordinary woman. But on moonlit nights, when she looked at the sky from the balcony, she would put her hand on her stomach and whisper, "Don't be afraid, my little one, I will protect you." The wolf in her watched in silence, feeling the heartbeat that was growing in her mother's body. Tea was like a white spark under the skin, a warm and bright presence. Perhaps the spirit of the forest had blessed her for 𝖭𝖔𝖗𝖊𝖗𝑗 sacrifice, for the love she had given and which she now received back in the form of this child. As the months passed, Sayan hid her pregnancy more and more carefully. Her loose dresses and silences became walls of protection. Not even Tarak, careful and intuitive as he was, suspected anything. In his eyes, his sister seemed healed, at peace. But deep inside, Sayan felt two worlds colliding again, that of man and that of the beast. The child in her seemed to hear the calls of the night, to startle when the moon rose, as if she knew, even before birth, that a legacy as old as the earth slept within him. One evening, sitting next to Bobby, Sayan pressed her ear to his chest and listened to the beating of his human heart. He must not know, she told herself, because his love would die with the truth. And so, between light and shadow, between love and fear, Sayan experienced the mystery of the deepest love, the one that does not ask, does not shout, and does not boast. The love of a woman who was once a wolf, and who finally, that night, understood what it means to be human. Chapter 13. The Fire in the Mirrors. Night lay over New York like a heavy, dark velvet cloak, covering the illuminated streets and the blocks that seemed to touch the sky. In the Turner family's glass mansion, the silence had an almost painful weight. The world thought her happy, fulfilled, a goddess of fortune who had risen from nothing to conquer the heart of one of the most powerful men in America. But Sayan, the woman between worlds, lived each night as if she were fighting a beast that she carried in her blood. Every evening, when the city fell asleep, Sayan felt the call. It was not a voice, no specific sound, but a deep vibration, coming from her bones, from her blood, from her very essence. She looked in the mirror and her face seemed foreign. The silver hair, the pale skin, the amber eyes, everything was too beautiful, too unreal, like a mask under which something else was smoldering. On a full moon night, the window glass began to tremble in the cold wind. Sayan woke up suddenly, not knowing why. In the bedroom, the moonlight dripped onto the floor like a silver blade. He got up and walked to the large mirror in the corner of the room. In its reflection, something was out of place. The look in the mirror did not belong to him. The pupils were dilated, the eyes shone with an animalistic intensity. "No. Not now," she whispered, trembling. She touched the glass, and the image smiled back. But not a human smile. It was a grin, a corner of a mouth raised, a beastly fong. She took a step back, her heart beating wildly. Fire surged through her veins. She felt her neck burn, her nails ache, her muscles stretched. In the mirror, the image writhed, stretched. White fur covered her reflected arms. And then, the glass cracked. Sayan screamed. A muffled sound, impossibly human. The mirror shattered, and her reflection scattered into thousands of shards. When she looked into the remaining pieces, she was no longer a woman. The white she-wolf was watching her from there, her eyes burning. The curse had not gone away, he had only slept. That night, Sayan fled into the city. The streets were empty, deserted, lit only by yellow streetlights and flickering advertisements. In the heart of New York, the Siberian beast woke up. The first to see her was a parking lot guard. He had thought she was a white dog, but when the light settled on her fur, he felt a cold shiver. The she-wolf approached silently, looking at him with a cold, almost human curiosity. He tried to run, but it was too late. Single leap, a warm breath on his neck, and then silence. In the morning, the police found the guard's body. The newspapers exploded again. The white beast returns. Victim torn apart in the city center. Tarak read the headline at the blacksmith shop, his hand shaking. There was no longer any doubt. The fire had returned. That day, he went to Turner Mansion. Bobby was away on a business meeting, and Sayan was waiting for him in the parlor, pale, her eyes lost. When she saw her brother, she knew he knew. "You shouldn't have come, Tarak," she said, looking down. "It was the moon again, wasn't it?" She shook her head, tears falling onto the marble floor. "I looked in the mirror." And she looked back. "We have to find a way, Sayan. You can't live like this. Mirrors are like gates, Tarak. When I look at me, she sees me. She wants to live, to breathe, to feel the blood." Tarak sighed. He was afraid of that. The spirit of the she-wolf had not died. It had just adapted. The city was the new forest, and the mirrors, the new hunting grounds. In the evening, Bobby returned, full of joy, telling Sayan about a new contract, about a charitable foundation. She listened to him, smiling weakly. But there was a smoldering panic in her eyes. "Did you have a bad dream, my love?" he asked, touching her hand. "No, just fatigue." But in the mirror behind him, Sayana's reflection blinked a split second later, small detail, but enough to make her quickly look away. The next night, she felt the call again. This time, she tried to fight it. She drank a bitter tea, an old recipe from a shaman they had once known in Yaransk. Then she sat in front of the mirror and lit candles. "You are no longer the master," she whispered to the reflection. "I choose." But the voice that answered her was the same, only deeper, coming from the glass. You are just skin, I am the fire." The candles suddenly went out. The glass began to heat up, as if it had caught fire from within. The she-wolf's reflection moved independently of her, clinging to the glass like a living shadow. Sayan screamed and smashed the mirror with her bare hands. The shards pierced her flesh, blood flowed, but the fire died down. The she-wolf was gone. When Bobby found her, she was lying on the floor, unconscious. Her hands covered in blood and shards. He thought it was an accident. The doctors said it was stress, hallucinations. He hired a nurse, closed all the mirrors in the house, and promised to take her to a clinic. But Tarak knew the truth. A few days later, he went to her again. Sayan was standing in the garden, dressed in white, looking at the flowers. She seemed calm, but her eyes were empty. "The mirrors are not to blame, Tarak," she told him softly. "The sky is to blame. The moon looks at me and wants me." "Maybe the moon just reminds you of who you are," he said. She smiled bitterly. "Who am I? A woman. A beast. Or just a curse that doesn't know how to die? Tarak had no answer. A few nights later, the she-wolf returned. But this time, the fire in the mirrors did not remain within the walls. He fled into the world. 3 people were found dead in a Turner steel warehouse. The newspapers spoke of an escaped animal, the police of a serial killer. Sayan read the articles with trembling hands. Then she looked in the mirror again. The mirror no longer showed a beast, but only a tired woman. But behind her, in the reflection of the moon in the window, a white shadow passed silently. The fire continued to burn, smoldering, hidden, waiting for the next night. Her marriage was now a flaming glass palace, and every mirror in the house reflected not beauty but torment. The fire in the mirrors could not be extinguished with tears, nor with love. It was the voice of blood, the memory to a world that did not forgive. The next night, when she looked at herself again, the she-wolf smiled and said, "You wanted a human life, Sayan. But you forgot that fire does not live in cages." And with a fiery look, she broke the mirror again, and that sound of broken glass, the woman and the beast were united again. Chapter 14. The Traces. New York no longer slept. The streets that were once full of life, laughter and the smell of cheap coffee, now trembled with fear. In the newspapers, on the radio and on television, there was talk of the night killer, a mysterious creature that tore apart victims without mercy, leaving behind only chaos, blood and oppressive silence. The police seemed powerless in a metropolis where death had become a statistic. These crimes had something different. This was not a simple serial killer. It was something older, more primitive, something that made the blood freeze in the veins. Lieutenant Marion Blake, a veteran with a face lined with years and guilt, was the first to arrive at the scene of the latest murder. The Turner Steel Company warehouse was a deserted place, lit by the pale headlights of the police. The air smelled of iron, blood, and fear. "Oh my God," one of the agents muttered, pointing to the footprints in the wet cement. Marion leaned over. The footprints were bizarre. Footsteps of a woman, barefoot, thin, but deep, as if the body had an inhuman weight. And mixed in between them were claw marks. Large, sharp, with 5 fingers. Not of a dog, nor of a wolf. Something different. "What the hell is this?" asked the young agent. Marion sighed. "Maybe an animal or a curse," he whispered, not believing what he was saying either. He raised the flashlight and illuminated the walls. Deep scratches, traces of struggle, blood splattered on the metal boxes. The victim, a night employee, had been torn apart. But the strangest part was that his face seemed at peace. "He didn't die of fright," said the coroner. "He died, looking at his executioner." Marion looked at the tracks again. Some of them stopped abruptly, and others, the wolf tracks, seemed to continue to a sewer mouth. "Human tracks and animal tracks," he said silently. "A woman and a wolf, maybe one and the same being." That night, the city was gripped by a general hysteria. The police patrolled the industrial districts, but to no avail. Everyone thought it was an animal escaped from the zoo, but the veterinarians denied it. "There's no such thing," they said. "A wolf that size couldn't exist in New York." But the tracks didn't lie. Tarak, reading the morning news, felt his stomach tighten. In every article, in every description, he saw the signs of his sister. He didn't need proof. He felt them in the air, in the metallic smell of the night, in the tremor of the ground under her feet. He went secretly to one of the crime scenes. And there, among the police and the curious, he found what he was looking for. On the edge of the sidewalk, among the raindrops, a track small, barely visible, but unmistakable, a woman's step, and next to it, the claw mark of a wolf's paw. Tarak bent down, touching the ground. The footprints were cold, but beneath them he could feel the energy pulsing. An old force, born of the curse, smoldered there. "Sayan," he murmured. He stood up and looked up at the sky. The moon was hiding behind clouds, but he knew she was there, waiting. That evening at the Turner house, Sayan sat in the bathroom, looking in the mirror. The mirror was covered with a thick cloth, as Bobby had requested after the incident weeks ago. But she pushed the cloth aside. "I felt you today," he said in a low voice. "I know you feed on me." The reflection smiled, a wolfish smile. "You are me, Sayan. Without me, you are just a shadow that fears the light." She closed her eyes. She could smell the blood from that night, the dust, the fear. She didn't remember exactly what she had done, but her body was covered in scratches. The curse was pulling her down, and the city was becoming the scene of a new nightmare. Throughout the city, people were talking about the white beast. Those who claimed to have seen it described it in different ways: a huge wolf, a woman with fiery eyes, a demon. People who didn't know each other, but they all said the same thing: it had eyes of amber. Tarak decided he couldn't wait any longer. He sought out the Indian medicine man, an old man who lived on the outskirts of the city, in a park forgotten by the world. "You came with the shadow of a woman in your soul," the medicine man told him. "She is not possessed. She is torn in two. Can you help her?" The old man closed his eyes. "The curse of the white wolf is tied to the moon. If you stop her from dreaming, you stop the beast. But if you wake her up when the moon is full, you lose her forever." Tarak understood. While he was searching for the cure, the police were discovering new traces. This time, not just footsteps and claws, but also blood trails that stopped suddenly, as if the beast had vanished into thin air. "Maybe it's a hoax," said one of the officers. "Hoaxes don't leave people without a neck," replied Marion and the laboratory, the experts. They were analyzing the DNA samples. The result left them speechless: a double genetic trace, partly human, partly unknown. Biologists could not explain it. "It's a mistake," they said. "There is no such combination." But Tarak knew. One night, he went to his sister. He found her on the terrace of the house, looking out over the city. "Your traces are everywhere, Sayan. The city is afraid. She has not returned. They do not know what they are, Tarak. I do not kill them. Release them. They smell fear, and I only take it from them. This is not liberation, it is death." Sayan turned, tears shining in her eyes. "And what am I, brother? Life or death?" Tarak wanted to hug her, but at that moment, a sound was heard from afar: police sirens. Sayan jumped. "She's looking for me." "I can hide you," Tarak told him. "No, I have to hide myself." She disappeared into the night. Later, the police discovered a new crime scene, near the center of the city. This time, written in blood on the wall, was a strange symbol: a half-moon over a woman's silhouette. Lieutenant Marion looked at the scene and said, "We're not dealing with a beast anymore, we're dealing with a ghost." The newspapers called her the Amber Shadow. But to Tarak, she was just his sister, lost between two worlds, leaving behind traces of centuries-old suffering. And as the city boiled with panic and urban hunters set out on the trail of a living legend, Tarak knew the painful truth. The traces were not just of a crime, but of divine punishment: a woman and a wolf. Two beating hearts in one body, condemned to leave behind traces that will never be erased. And that night, as the rain washed the blood from the asphalt, Tarak looked up at the sky and whispered, "Even the sky fears your footsteps, Sayan, because they lead nowhere. They just always come back to us." Chapter 15. The Brooklyn Witch. Brooklyn was not the place to look for saints or healers. Amid the gray blocks and graffiti-strewn streets, the city pulsed with its chaotic rhythms: hip-hop, sirens, streetcars, the noise of lives struggling to survive. But behind an abandoned church, among garbage and moss-covered walls, Tarak would find the Brooklyn witch doctor. The old man was no ordinary man. Those who knew him said he had lived there for decades. Untouched by time, he had hair as white as sea foam, amber eyes, almost like Sayon's, and a cane carved with tribal symbols. They called him 𝖂𝖗𝖊𝖃, which in the ancient Cherokee language meant spirit that watches in silence. Tarak found him as a dock worker had told him, under the bell tower, where the shadows smell of sage smoke. When he entered, the air changed. The silence had a strange weight, like an unheard prayer. In the middle of the room, the old man was burning herbs in a clay pot. The smoke rose slowly, drawing spirals that seemed alive. "I was waiting for you," 𝖂𝖗𝖊𝖃 said without looking up. Tarak stopped. "I don't think we've seen each other before." The old man smiled slightly. "Not here, not at this time. But your blood smells of the steppe and fire. It's the blood of those who speak to the moon." Tarak understood then that the old man knew. He didn't need to tell him his sister's name, nor the curse that devoured her. "She is lost," Tarak said. "Every night when the moon rises, she becomes something else. She kills. And in the morning she cries." 𝖂𝖗𝖃 tapped her staff on the floor, as if she were beating an ancient rhythm. "What has been bound by blood cannot be broken by words," he said. "The curse of the white wolf cannot be broken, but it can be put to sleep." "How?" "By balance.By the silence of the heart." The old man stared at him. "When the spirit of a beast is awakened by rage, it cannot be destroyed. It can only rest. She must learn to sleep with the wolf, not chase it away." Tarak was silent. In his heart, each word sounded like a hammer on an anvil. "She doesn't want to fight," he said. "She's afraid. And sometimes I think she wants to disappear." 𝖂𝖗𝖃 closed her eyes. "She doesn't disappear. She hides inside you. Your spirit is bound. What she suffers, you feel too." The old man stood up, heavily, and walked to an old chest in the corner of the room. He opened it, taking out a small buffalo hide bag. "Here is the dust of silence. It is made from the ashes of the fountain grass and the root of the night. If you burn it when the moon is growing, the beast will sleep. But be careful, don't force it. If it resists, it will be torn between two worlds and it will no longer be a woman or a wolf. Just a shadow." Tarak received the bag with both hands, as if it were a relic. "What should I do?" "You must bring her here," said 𝖂𝖗𝖃. "The wolf spirit cannot be soothed by the noise of the city. He must hear the song of the ancient forests." "And if she refuses?" The old man smiled sadly. "Then the beast will stay awake, and the city will be its grave." Tarak left the place in silence. On the streets of Brooklyn, the wind carried the smell of iron and smoke, mixed with the echo of a civilization that had forgotten magic. He walked for hours, his bag clutched in his palm. He felt its weight like a covenant. On the way home, he remembered their childhood, the nights when their mother would sing them stories about wolves falling in love with humans and women who could talk to the wind. Now, those legends seemed alive. When he arrived at the Turner mansion, the lights were out. He entered quietly. He found Sayan in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at a gold ring Bobby had given her. "You're here," she said without turning around. "We have to go, Sayan." She turned slowly, her gaze tired, but also dangerously calm. "We go." "Where?" "To someone who can help you." She smiled ironically. "No one can help me, brother." Tarak approached, taking out the bag. "Yes. The curse can be put to sleep. It's not a cure, but it's a chance." Sayan looked at the bag, then at his eyes. In them, she saw that iron determination she recognized from childhood. "And if I don't want to sleep?" she asked. "What if the wolf is all I have left?" Tarak answered in a broken voice. "Then you will perish, and I with you." The words hit him too, like a truth spoken too late. Sayan was silent. She stood up, approached him and placed her hand on his chest. "You swore to me that you would never leave me. And I will not. but we must fight differently. That look was enough. The next night they left. The journey to Brooklyn was a journey through silence. Sayan stood in the back, watching the city fade in the light of the lanterns. From time to time, her eyes sparkled in the reflection of the moon, a sign that the she-wolf was close to the surface. 𝖂𝖗𝖋 was waiting for them in front of the church. A small fire burned, and the smoke smelled of sage and oak root. "Are you sure you want this?" Tarak asked. "I'm not sure of anything anymore, brother, but if you believe, I'll try." The sorcerer raised his hand, stopping them. "Before you enter, you must leave your names behind. There is no room for people inside, but only for spirits." Tarak agreed. They stepped into the abandoned church, now transformed into a temple of shadows. Candles burned on the walls, and ancient symbols were drawn on the floor. 𝖂𝖗𝖋 placed a clay pot with the dust of silence between them, face to face. "When the smoke rises, do not speak. Your spirit will choose whether to rest or to tear itself apart." She lit the fire. The smoke rose slowly, dancing between them. Sayan began to tremble. Marks appeared on her skin, silver stripes, like living runes. Her eyes closed, and a deep groan escaped her throat, more animal than human. Tarak grabbed her hands. "Resist, Sayan." 𝖂𝖗𝖋 sang something in a language that time had forgotten. The lyrics were like an invocation. "The moon sleeps, the blood is silent, the beast lies down." Sayan writhed. Smoke enveloped her body. For a moment, her face distorted, white fur began to show under her skin, but then it receded. The fire suddenly died out. Silence. Sayan fell into Tarak's arms, faint, but her breathing calm. Her eyes were closed. There was no trace of suffering on her face. "She sleeps," 𝖂𝖗𝖋 said. "But not forever. How long will it last? How long will she believe that love is stronger than bloodlust?" Tarak rested his forehead on her shoulder. His tears fell onto his sister's skin, mixing with the scent of burning herbs. 𝖂𝖗𝖋 approached and whispered, "Remember, young wolf, curses don't go away. They just learn to breathe differently." When they left the church, dawn was pouring over Brooklyn. The city, for the first time in many nights, seemed quiet. Sayan slept in Tarak's arms, like a child. The smoke had cleared, but an echo of the medicine man's singing hung in the air. Tarak looked up at the sky. The moon had disappeared. The day was beginning. He knew that the sleeping of the curse was only a temporary victory. But for the first time in a long time, he felt that there was still hope. And that morning, in the gray silence of Brooklyn, the old medicine man prayed softly, looking out over the city. "May the she-wolf dream of a world where blood no longer demands blood, and where the man in her never forgets the light." Chapter 16, The Liquor of Sleep. Night descended over Brooklyn like a heavy sheet of smoke. Above, the moon was slowly rising, a silver blade that announced danger. In the small room above the workshop, Sayan looked at herself in the mirror. Her face, beautiful and foreign, carried that restless light of those who live between two worlds, and her eyes, gold mixed with darkness. Deep inside, the she-wolf was already waking up, rustling like a beast that feels its chains loosening. Tarak, in silence, climbed the wooden stairs, carrying a clay pot. In his hands, inside, was the witch doctor's liquor, a sacred drink, meant to put the curse to sleep. Its smell was strange, sweet and bitter at the same time, reminiscent of forgotten herbs and the rain falling on cold stones. The witch doctor 𝖂𝖗𝖋 had prepared it with the solemnity of a ritual. "It is not a simple potion," he had said, "but a covenant between sleep and soul. If she drinks it, the beast will sleep. But if she rejects it, her dream will turn against her." After they returned from the temple in the abandoned church, the days had passed in apparent peace. Sayan had not transformed, but the signs were there, a trembling of her hands when she looked at the moon through the window, a shadow of cruel desire in her eyes, a too deep breath when the wind brought the scent of blood. Tarak knew. It was only a matter of time. You must try it, the old man had told him. A potion that puts the wolf to sleep? Sounds like a dream. No, 𝖂𝖗𝖊𝖗 had replied, it sounds like a fight, a dream is just another battle. And now, on that silver evening, the fight was beginning again. Sayan watched her brother as he entered. She was no longer the lost woman he had found in the basement, but a silent queen weary of her own power. You brought it, she said. Tarak nodded and set the bowl on the table. It's your last chance. 𝖂𝖗𝖊𝖗 said that if you drink it before the moon is full, you will sleep until morning. Sayan approached the bowl. The steam rose in fine waves, leaving in the air the scent of sage, tree moss, and a strangely sweet note, like honey mixed with ashes. And if I don't wake up, then you will finally have the peace you seek, Tarak replied. She smiled sadly. Peace is for the dead, brother. She sat down and looked at the liquid in the bowl. Her face was reflected in it, a woman with an animal in her eyes. When I was little, my mother said that dreams could change the world, she said softly. Maybe it's time for me to believe in dreams too. She raised the bowl to her lips. The liquor was bitter, but at the same time silky. She swallowed it. A cold shiver ran down her throat, down to her heart. Tarak watched her, motionless. I feel something, she murmured. Like a mist rising from me. She stood up, trying to walk, but her knees gave way. Tarak caught her before she fell. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the struggle that was going on inside, between woman and beast. At the same moment, outside, the moon rose above the horizon, round and perfect. Its light poured over Brooklyn like an ocean of silver. Sayan began to moan. Beneath her skin, muscles tensed, veins bulged, and from behind, a white, almost phosphorescent steam rose. Tarak called her name, but his voice was lost in the wind. From her chest, the howl erupted, but not completely. T was a torn sound, half human, half animal. The wolf was trying to give birth, but the spirit was pulling her back. Sleep, sister, he whispered, holding her tightly. Please, sleep. And slowly, the howl died down. Her breathing calmed, and in her amber eyes appeared again the serenity of a man. Tarak remained bent over her for a long time, listening to her calm breathing. The spirit had succeeded. The wolf was sleeping in the corner of the room. The flame of a candle danced lazy. Its smoke formed strange silhouettes, faces, wolves, shadows. Tarak thought, for a moment, that he heard the medicine man's voice echoing in the air. Every sleep has a price. Remember, young wolf. Falling asleep is not the end, but the beginning of another dream. Sayan slept on the small bed, pale but quiet. Around her, the air smelled of burnt grass and wet stone. It was as if the forest at home had crept into the middle of the city, just to protect her. Tarak stayed awake all night. Through the window, the moonlight slowly decreased, giving way to the grey dawn. In the morning, Sayan woke up. Her eyes were clear. For the first time in months, she no longer had that animal reflex, that tremor in her muscles. She walked, she said, barely hearing. Yes, he replied. The liquor put you to sleep. She smiled, but the smile had a hint of sadness. It's like I dreamed I was a child again in the forest, with you and my mother. And nothing scared me. Tarak touched her forehead. Maybe this is the cure, Sayan. Not the disappearance of the curse, but the finding of the child who was before it. But in the corner of the room, the steam of the liquor remained, floating in the air like a promise. In the days that followed, the ritual became part of their lives. Every evening before the full moon, Sayan drank the liquor. Every night she slept soundly, untouched by the transformation. Tarak wrote everything down in a journal, as the medicine man had taught him. On the 3rd day, the beast is silent, and the 7th day, the sleep is pure, and the 10th day, its eyes no longer seek the moon. But something was bothering him. One morning, he noticed that Sayan did not remember anything from her dreams. When he asked her what she had dreamed, she shrugged her shoulders. Nothing. Only darkness. And one night, when the moon was stronger than ever, the potion seemed weaker. Sayan stirred in his sleep, muttering foreign names, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Sound escaped his throat, that old creepy growl of the she-wolf. Tarak took the bag of herbs and threw some into the fire. The smoke rose, thick, blued. He murmured 𝖂𝖗𝖗's prayer. After a few moments, Sayan calmed down again. He stayed awake, watching her. He knew that the curse had not gone away, she was only sleeping. Like a beast licking its wounds, waiting for a moment of weakness. One day, he went to the medicine man, carrying a small bottle with the rest of the potion. She sleeps, but she does not dream, he said. That's right, 𝖂𝖗𝖗 replied. The liquor does not heal, but separates the world inside from the outside. While it drinks, the beast does not dream, and the woman does not remember. But what if he forgets who he is? The old man looked at him for a long time. Perhaps forgetting is the only salvation. Tarak felt a knot in his chest. To live without memories, without dreams, is also a form of death, he thought to himself. 𝖂𝖗𝖗, as if reading his soul, added, "Be careful, brother wolf. If the beast sleeps too long, when it wakes up, it will no longer know who it belongs to." The next night, Tarak sat next to his sleeping sister and looked at her for a long time. On her face, the moonlight cast an almost divine aura. She might have seemed like an angel if she had not known the truth. Inside her slept a beautiful demon. He touched her forehead lightly and whispered, "I do not want to lose you, Sayan. Neither in sleep, nor in dream." Then he extinguished the candle, and that deep silence, somewhere between reality and dream, Sayan dreamed for the first time. Not a nightmare, but a forest. The snow was falling slowly, and a white shadow walked among the trees. When she got closer, she saw that it was herself, but without a face. From the chest of that shadow came a gentle voice. "Do not be afraid of sleep. In sleep, wolves can love too." Sayan reached out. When she touched the beast, it dissolved into light. And then, for the first time, the woman and the she-wolf breathed at the same time. Dawn, Tarak found her smiling. She had slept soundly, without flinching, on the bedside table. The vessel was empty. He looked out the window at the city skyline, a mixture of smoke, glass, and light. And, in that moment, he knew that the liquor of sleep was not just a cure, but a symbol, a fragile bridge between curse and blessing. The she-wolf had not died. She had only dozed off, and somewhere, deep in his soul, Tarak, the medicine man's voice rang out again. "Sleep is just another form of waking. Hold her close, brother wolf. Because one day when she dreams again, the dream may come true." Chapter 17. The Deceptive Silence. The city seemed to breathe easier as the months passed. The noise of the streets, the horns, the smell of gasoline, and the smoke of the factories had become part of their lives, a modern routine that enveloped everything in a semblance of normality. In the Bronx workshop, Tarak worked tirelessly, and in the Manhattan apartment, Sayan lived like a happy woman, the beloved wife of a rich man, admired at receptions, photographed in magazines, seen as an ideal of beauty and refinement, and no one suspected that another being was hidden in her amber eyes, an animal that slept deeply, peacefully, but never dead. The Brooklyn medicine man's liquor worked. Every month, before the full moon rose over the city's metallic horizon, Tarak prepared the bitter tea, steaming, smelling of burning herbs and wood smoke. Sayan drank it in silence, with the look of a tired child, and then she would fall asleep deeply, in a dreamless sleep. When morning came, the sun's rays would find her serene, motionless, without traces of blood, without screams. For the first time in her life, she could believe that the curse had, in a way, been defeated. Bobby loved her with an intensity that was almost painful. He looked at her as a divine being, a goddess descended among men in his eyes. Sayan was not just a beautiful woman, she was something sacred, a promise of eternity. He had built her a house on the ocean front, in the Hamptons, with large windows through which she could see the sea and a glass tower where she could paint. Because Sayan had started painting again in the silence of the studio, the colors were her refuge. The white, the silver, the shades of pale blue, all reminiscent of the snow in Yaransk and the nights when she ran through the forest. Tarak often came to visit. He looked at Bobby with a cold silence, a mixture of gratitude and distrust. He knew that his sister's happiness was a thin thread, stretched across an abyss. He knew that, deep down in her being, the wolf slept only because it was lulled by the medicine man's liquor. But the liquor was not eternal. The medicine man had told her clearly, she will have to drink it always. She must not forget it for a month. Because if one night passes without the sacred sleep, then there is no way to stop it. Sayan wanted to believe that her life was finally simple. She went to balls, organized donations for orphanages, appeared in interviews. Everyone loved her. But at night, sometimes, she felt something move inside, a slight twitch, a call that flowed through her veins. When she saw the moon through the bedroom window, even covered with clouds, a strange desire made her get out of bed. Her hands trembled, and her breathing quickened. Then Tarak would watch over her in silence, prepared, with the old Yaransk flute, which he played softly until she fell asleep again. One autumn evening, an almost insignificant incident disturbed their fragile balance. The medicine man's liquor had not arrived on time. A late package, a storm that had blocked the port. Sayan waited anxiously, and Tarak could already feel the air changing. The moon was about to rise, and he knew that every moment mattered. She improvised a substitute, boiling tea from the leftovers, but Sayan could tell the difference. She drank, but the taste was bitter in a different, foreign way. That night, her sleep was not deep, in her dreams. The images began to return, the blood, the screams, the forest. In the morning she woke up suddenly. Her nails dug deep into the sheets, and around her, the pillows were torn. Tarak saw the small but clear claw marks. He said nothing. He burned everything in the back garden and swore it would never happen again. But in his eyes, a silent restlessness had taken root. In the months that followed, the calm became a mask. Sayan laughed at parties, but Tarak saw a deeper shadow in her eyes. Sometimes, when the wind brought the smell of the ocean, she would frown and say, "There's something in air. Something old. It's like I feel the forest, Tarak." He kept telling her, "The forest is far away, my sister." She didn't listen to her anymore. But in his heart he knew that the forest had no distance. It lived in the blood. One evening, Bobby noticed small scars on his wife's arms, like fine scratches. She said she had cut herself painting, but he felt it was something else. He tried to ask her, but Sayan pulled away, smiling faintly. The next day she went to an art gallery alone and got lost in the crowd. Tarak found her hours later, standing in a park, looking at the moon through the mist. "I feel tired," she told him. "Like a part of me is waking up when everything should be sleeping." Tarak knew then that their silence had an expiration date. Curses don't disappear, they just change form. She might no longer be a beast tearing people apart in the streets, but in her soul the wolf breathed, silently, growing with each passing month. The sorcerer, called again, warned them. Fire never goes out, it only subsides. And when the flame is kept in a cage for too long, when it escapes, everything burns. One night, Tarak dreamed of the snow-covered Yaransk, and the dream, a white she-wolf howled on a rock. And from her throat came not only pain, but also a call. Brother, the time is approaching. When he woke up, the full moon was in the sky, and the room was empty. Sayan was gone. The silence was only an illusion, a pause between two storms, and the distance, the siren of a police car could already be heard. And in the trembling moonlight, on the roof of a Manhattan building, a white shadow moved, graceful but terrifying. The silence had been only the prelude. The wolf had woken up again, and with it, the fate of the two brothers would be rewritten, again, in blood and city lights. Chapter 18. The Shadow in the Dream. Night had descended on New York with a strange, almost unreal silence. In Sayan's glass apartment, the moon cast its pale rays over the glossy walls, over her unfinished paintings, over the bed in which the woman slept restlessly. Everything around her seemed inert. Only her irregular breathing and the distant hum of the city betrayed the fact that the world was not really sleeping. In the dream, Sayan was again in the forest. The snow was falling in great waves, and the wind was biting her body. She felt the cold burning her skin, but she did not move. In front of her, an old tree rose from the snow like a pillar of the world, and above, the moon, large, full, bleeding, poured its light everywhere. A silhouette emerged from the shadow of the tree, tall, indefinite, as if made of fog and smoke. "You forgot the howl, Sayan," said a deep voice, echoing for thousands of years. But he did not forget you. The words entered her bones. It was the voice of the spirit of the forest, the one that had once spoken to her in Yaransk, the night the white she-wolf was born from her body. In her dream, Sayan wanted to answer, but her mouth went dry. She was afraid, not of the spirit, but of the truth it brought. The spirit he approached, and around him the snow began to melt. Instead of pure white, the ground turned red, as if blood had flowed beneath it. Wolves began to appear from the mist. Black and white shadows, with shining eyes. "They are still looking for you," the voice said. "The forest does not forget. The howl is not just a call, it is a covenant. You have broken the covenant, woman of two worlds." Sayan took a step back. Around her, the wind turned into a chorus of howls. Dozens of voices, thousands, piercing the air, piercing her ears. "No, I do not want to hear," she cried, but the spirit's voice grew louder. "You have slept too long. The wolf does not sleep, he watches. When man forgets, the beast remembers." A white she-wolf rose from the ground, with shining fur and golden eyes. It was herself, a reflection, an echo. The she-wolf stepped forward, looking deeply at her. "You are me," said Sayan, trembling. "No," the beast answered, in a voice that was more felt than heard. "I am what you have hidden, I am what you cannot kill." Then the she-wolf rushed towards her. Sayan screamed and woke up suddenly, her body wet with sweat and her heart beating wildly. The room was lit only by the moon that entered through the huge windows. She felt the cold air on her skin and understood that the dream was not just a dream. Familiar smell hung in the air, damp earth, snow and blood. That smell that she had not felt since she had fled Yaransk. She got out of bed, trembling, and went to the mirror. In the glass reflection, her eyes seemed brighter than usual. The pupils widened and narrowed, like those of an animal. She reached for the mirror, but the image trembled slightly, as if something had moved in it, behind the glass. "You forgot the howl." The voice rang out again, like a breeze. Sayan turned suddenly, but there was no one, only the wind blowing through the cracks in the windows and the ocean lapping the shore in the distance. He collapsed to his knees, his hands on his chest. "No, not again," he whispered. Bobby was sleeping in another room, exhausted after a business dinner. Tarak wasn't there. He had gone to the workshop, called away for an emergency. Sayan was alone. And just then, when loneliness filled the entire space, the dream began to lengthen into reality. He felt his skin tighten, a cold shiver run down his spine. He closed his eyes, trying to remember the medicine man's prayers, but the words escaped his lips. Sacred sleep, sacred sleep. He desperately searched for the liquor, but the glass was empty. He had forgotten to drink it, and the sky, the moon was slowly rising, illuminating the entire room. Tremor gripped his hands. Invisible claws curled in his veins. His breathing changed, deep, heavy, animalistic. He tried to get up, but his legs went limp, and the mirror, her reflection, began to contort. The white fur covered her shoulders. Her eyes turned golden. Muffled cry turned into a heartbreaking howl. The window cracked, and the birds rose in fright from the rooftops. Then everything stopped. Sayan was in the middle of the room again, but the fur was gone. It was just her, shivering, her bare feet on the cold floor. The trace of the transformation had been only a moment, a promise of what was to come. In the morning, Tarak found her in the same place. Her eyes were red from sleeplessness, and her lips were trembling. "You dreamed of him, didn't you?" he asked, knowing the answer. She nodded. "The spirit of the forest. He told me that the howl hasn't forgotten me." Tarak closed his eyes for a moment. "That means the bond has awakened. The sorcerer was right. Sleep is not eternal. The spirit is calling you back." "I will not return," said Sayan, with voice trembling but determined. "I am not that beast anymore. I do not want to be anymore." But Tarak saw in her eyes the golden spark, the flicker of dormant instinct. He knew that the wolf would claim her again. That day, the city was covered in a cold autumn rain, and the streets, the shadows seemed longer, and the wind brought strange echoes between the buildings. Several people swore that they heard at dawn a lost howl somewhere over Manhattan. Sayan tried to go on with her life. But every night, when he closed his eyes, the same dream came back. The spirit, the wolves, the forest. Every time the voice told him the same thing. "The moon does not forget you, daughter of the snow. You can run from the forest, but not from yourself." And every morning, he woke up trembling, with the marks of imaginary claws burned into his skin, knowing that time was running out. The curse had not been put to sleep, only postponed. And the shadow in the dream was only the beginning of the end. Chapter 19. Blood Moon. The city did not know what was coming. The autumn sky was clear, but a strange silence weighed on New York. Above the skyscrapers, the moon rose slowly, heavy, huge and red like an open wound. It was a rare night, a night of total eclipse, when the sky split in two and the shadows came to life. Sayan stood at her bedroom window, watching the bloody light embrace the city. She felt the air change. The vibration of the streets became different. Her heart beat in an unknown rhythm. The medicine man's liquor was on the bedside table, in a glass. She had always drunk it before the full moon. But that evening, even though she drank it, the taste was different. Bitter, metallic, without the soothing power of old. "It's just the eclipse," she told herself. She whispered, "It'll pass." Bobby was already asleep, exhausted after a dinner with investors. Tarak was away at the workshop, called by an important client. Sayan was alone, and in that solitude she felt a growing restlessness, an old, deep calling, stronger than any human desire. And the bedroom mirror, her reflection seemed slightly distorted. Her pupils dilated, and a golden glow spread around them, like a flame under her skin. And for the first time in months, she felt the thrill of the curse, a burning sensation that rose from her spine to the back of her neck, a current of fire and ice that made her lose control. She ran to the window, opening it. The cold night air hit her face, but it brought no relief. On the contrary, it intensified everything, the smells, the sounds, the metallic taste of the moon. Down in the streets, she could hear people's hearts. She could distinguish each person's footsteps, their heartbeats, the whispers in the neighboring apartments. "No," she whispered, trying to cling to her human voice. "I won't let this happen." But the curse didn't listen to prayers. The moonlight filtered through the open window and touched her skin. In that moment, the medicine man's liquor turned to water, and the sleep spell shattered. The pain came like a bolt of lightning. Her bones stretched, her flesh tightened, and her skin caught fire. Sayan fell to her knees, screaming. The scream turned into a howl on the floor. The shadows were breaking along with her body. The transformation was more violent than ever. Her white fur pierced her skin in flames, and her eyes became completely golden, with reddish reflections of blood. The red moon made her stronger, but also more uncontrollable. When the howl filled the apartment, the windows broke and the pigeons rose in fright from the surrounding rooftops. The white she-wolf stood up, breathing hard. Everything around her smelled of fear and life. She looked at Bobby, who was still asleep, and for a moment, something of her, that remnant of humanity, wanted to run away. But the beast inside no longer knew love. She knew only instinct. She ran out the balcony door, jumping nimbly over the edge. She fell into the street, into the shadows. Without a sound, and a few seconds, she had disappeared into the dark alleys of the Bronx. The city sensed her before anyone saw her. Dogs began to bark. Cats hid under cars. Birds flew chaotically between buildings. An ancient, unnatural presence had returned. The first victim was a thief trying to break into a car. She felt only a cold breath behind her, then nothing. The next was a policeman who came to investigate. In the red moonlight, he saw a white figure running across the rooftops. That same night, over 10 people died. Some of the underworld, others just unfortunate in the wrong place. Their bodies were found at sunrise, torn apart, but almost ritually arranged, a circle, their gaze directed to the east. Tarak heard the news in the morning. He was in his workshop, hammering hot iron, when one of the workers turned on the radio. 10 dead in the Bronx. Witnesses talk about a white beast. Police suspect an animal escaped from the zoo. The iron fell from Tarak's hand and no more was needed. He knew. He ran to his sister's apartment. He found the broken windows, the empty bed and the strong smell of blood mixed with perfume. In the room, on the floor, there were paw prints. "No," he whispered. The spirit was right. At that moment, Bobby appeared in the doorway, his eyes blurry and his lips trembling. "Where is Sayan? What happened here?" Tarak could not answer. His gaze said it all. The next night, Tarak climbed to the roof of the tallest building and looked up at the sky. The blood moon was rising again, deeper and deeper into the shadow of the earth. He closed his eyes and began to murmur an old prayer, a prayer from Yaransk, addressed to the spirit of the forest. "I beg you, let her live. Take back the curse, don't let her become a beast forever." But the spirit did not answer. Down in the streets of New York, the she-wolf ran. Every step was an echo of the lost forest. Every attack was a memory of the past. That night, the city was no longer a place for people. It was a forest of steel and light, and she was its bloody queen. Around midnight, she reached the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind was blowing hard, and the water below her reflected the moon like a wound. The she-wolf looked up at the sky and, for a moment, a tear appeared in her eyes. Maybe it was Sayana's pain, trapped somewhere deep. Maybe it was just the reflex of a beast remembering that she had been a woman. Then she screamed, a long, deep scream that echoed throughout the city. The sirens stopped for a moment. The noise of the cars fell silent. New York listened. Like an animal recognizing the voice of a predator, Sayana's howl was heard all the way to Queens, all the way to the edge of the Atlantic. And somewhere, deep in the forests of Canada, another howl answered her, Nuri, the lost brother, feeling the connection again. But for Sayan, the night was just beginning. When she returned home at dawn, she was a woman again. Covered in blood, trembling, she collapsed into Tarak's arms, who was waiting for her. "The potion didn't work," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The moon was red, and it wanted me." Tarak looked at her with pain. "The eclipse opened the gate. The spirit no longer sleeps." Sayan raised her eyes to the gray morning sky. "Then it means the end is coming, brother." And for the first time, Tarak could not contradict her. That day, New York was shrouded in an eerie silence. The press spoke of the Red Night, and people swore they had seen a white beast running through the lights. But for Tarak and Sayan, it was only the beginning of the end. The blood moon had not been a coincidence, it had been a calling. Chapter 20. The Massacre. Manhattan was sinking into an almost apocalyptic chaos. The streets, usually filled with the lights of advertisements and the noise of traffic, were now plunged into a heavy darkness, broken only by the intense red of the moon. That bloody light, which seemed to color the asphalt and buildings in shades of blood, brought with it a primal feeling of terror, a sensation that the city itself breathed fear. Sayan had completely transformed. Her white fur shone under the red light, and her eyes burned with a wild, inhuman fire. Her heart-rending screams spread among the skyscrapers, reverberating on the metal walls of the buildings. She was faster, stronger, and more merciless than ever. No wall, no vehicle, no man seemed capable of stopping her. The first massacre began in Times Square. The herds of tourists, tired of the lights and the constant crowd, woke up in the middle of a nightmare. The cars seemed to stop in fear. The taxis honked frantically, and people ran in all directions, trying to escape a presence that no one could describe. Sayan, the white she-wolf, crossed the square with incredible agility, jumping over barriers, breaking shop windows and attacking anyone in her path. Each fallen victim was just a simple formality for the curse that controlled her. Her eyes, golden and bloodshot, knew no mercy. They knew only instinct and the violent hunger that had transformed her into a weapon of nature. In the tall buildings, where the frightened people had hidden, the windows vibrated with every step of the being that now roamed Manhattan. The news broadcast live on television began to alarm the city. "A white beast, larger than a man, is attacking in Times Square. Police advise immediate escape." But the police had no chance. The bullets penetrated her skin like water, the guns made only a distant creak, and the SWAT troops who tried to stop her retreated in chaos. While the city cried and groaned, Tarak felt every step, every breath, every murmur of his sister. Although the police saw only a wild creature, Tarak understood the truth. That beast was none other than Sayan, his sister, trapped in a nightmare with no escape. In her eyes, beyond the anger and blood, he recognized the human shadows he knew so well: fear, pain, and despair. Tarak ran through the streets of Manhattan, shouting her name, "Sayan, please stop." But his words were lost in the creature's screams and the sound of sirens. He knew he couldn't hurt her, couldn't force her, because any aggression from him would be interpreted as a threat by the she-wolf who possessed her. All he could do was watch her, understand her, and search for a sliver of control, any loophole through which he could connect to her lost humanity. And the Empire State Building. Sayan leapt across the glowing rooftops, leaving white footprints behind her, like wax prints on the reddened concrete. In every apartment along her path, people collapsed in terror, hiding, trembling, and praying to survive. The atmosphere was one of epic carnage, a modern city transformed into a jungle, where the predator dominated everything. Tarak tried to slow her down, to give her a reminder of humanity, shouting, "Sayan, I am your brother. Recognize me." But his voice seemed lost in the ocean of screams. Yet, even in those moments of madness, he noticed her micro-movements, a hesitation at the corners of buildings, a tremor at the touch of a shadow that reminded him of their childhood, of the laughter and games in the forests of their home. While the she-wolf continued her massacre, emergency teams were called from all the streets. The army was mobilized. Helicopters hovered over the city, and drones tried to capture every movement of the being. But Sayan was much too fast, much too intelligent, and her instincts made her invisible to technology. She moved like a white shadow, like a white lightning between the buildings, and the victims fell mercilessly before her. In a moment of apparent calm, Tarak managed to catch up with her in Central Park. He ran after her through the trees, feeling the blood and adrenaline flowing through the city. "Sayan, you are still there, my sister. Don't forget who you are," he shouted, his voice broken by fear and love. The beast stopped for a moment, looking back with its bloodshot, golden eyes, like two flames in the darkness of the night, and that second, everything human in Sayan tried to surface. Tarak felt that glimmer of humanity and ran closer, touching her lightly on the arm. But the curse was still strong. The she-wolf felt the touch, felt her brother's love, but the killer instinct was too strong. With an agile leap, she disappeared again among the shadows of the park, leaving behind only the white footprints on the green grass and the fearful whispers of passers-by. Tarak remained in the middle of the park, trembling, knowing that the city was suffering, knowing that no one could stop this beast, but also that Sayan had not yet completely lost the fight with himself. In his eyes, the she-wolf was not just a monster. She was his sister, the victim of a relentless curse, and he had to find a way to save her, even if the whole world was against them. Meanwhile, Manhattan continued to be the scene of an unprecedented massacre. The streets were full of claw marks and blood, storefronts were broken, and the city had entered a state of total terror. Everyone tried to run, to hide, to survive, but no one could predict the creature's movements. It was a night that seemed to never end, a night in which civilization met pure and brutal instinct. In the end, Tarak understood that the only chance was not to fight her. The only chance was to follow her, to be present, to show her that there was a man who still loved her and who still believed she could be saved. That night, the massacre was not just about collateral damage. It was about a blood bond, about the struggle between humanity and bestiality, about the sister who, despite the curse, could still hear the call his brother. And so Manhattan remained haunted, between life and death, between man and beast, between hope and despair, with a white she-wolf roaming the streets and Tarak, the only one who knew the truth, following every howl, every step and every moment, knowing that the massacre was not just destruction. It was a call to reconciliation, even if the entire city paid the price for this fight. Chapter 21. The Last Duel. Central Park was no longer a place of peace, but a scene of nightmare. The wind blew through the leafless trees, carrying with it echoes of howls and fragments of distant sirens. Above, the red moon, immense and menacing, bathed everything in a bloody light, like an open wound in the sky. The lake, vast and dark, reflected the sky like a cloudy mirror, and in the middle of this hellish sight, Tarak waited for his sister. He had come there guided by instinct, not reason. He felt that everything was going to end. That night, either the curse would be broken, or everything would perish with him. He held in his hands an iron hammer, his tool of life and now, perhaps, of death. The air smelled of gunpowder, blood, and burnt leaves. Suddenly, from the shadows of the trees, a silhouette loomed white large, shining in the bloody light. The Sayan she-wolf. She moved with a chilling grace, and in her every step she carried the power and despair of a soul torn between two worlds. Her eyes, golden as hot topaz, stared at him with an intensity that made the air vibrate. Tarak did not move. His heart beat irregularly, but his eyes were clear. "My sister," he said softly, almost a prayer. The she-wolf let out a guttural growl, a sound that seemed a mixture between a howl and a cry. 𝖭𝖏 took a step forward. I know you are there, Sayan. You are not lost yet. You are fire and ice, but you must choose to remain human or to become a legend. Spark of hesitation lit up in the beast's eyes. Its fur ruffled, its claws dug into the ground. Everything around seemed suspended. The leaves stopped falling, the wind stopped blowing. Only the beating of their hearts, of the two brothers, could be heard in that heavy silence. But the curse did not give up easily. Sudden wind swept through the park, and the moon seemed to pulse louder, as if it were alive. Sayan rose on his hind legs and howled, a howl that seemed to tear the sky, a combination of pain, anger, and liberation. 𝖭𝖏 closed his eyes for a moment, and that sound tore at his soul. It was the howl of the same little girl he had who had protected her in childhood, who laughed among the trees of Yaransk, who loved and dreamed. But now that laughter had turned into a lament of bloody nature. The she-wolf threw herself at him. 𝖭𝖏 dodged, and her claws scratched his arm, leaving a deep cut. Blood ran warm on his skin, but he did not retreat. He raised the hammer, not as a weapon, but as a symbol. Sayan, I am not your enemy. She paused for a moment, breathing heavily, trembling between the desire to kill and the desire to cry. Then she leaped again, but 𝖭𝖏 did not strike. She let the hammer fall and opened her arms. The she-wolf slammed into his chest, knocking him to the ground, her fangs stopping a step from his neck. 𝖭𝖏 looked into her eyes, those golden eyes that once looked at the stars and the fire of Yaransk. Choose, Sayan. Are you the beast, or are you the woman who loved the flute and the light? Her breathing was heavy, strangled. Her fangs trembled, and her fur stood up completely. But from those eyes, tears began to flow. The she-wolf began to stagger, a heartbreaking moan escaping between her teeth. The red moon, which until then seemed to nourish her, was now gradually fading, covered by heavy clouds. While the beast struggled between two realities, 𝖭𝖏 touched its head with bloody hands. Return, my sister, back to where the howl means life, not death. For a moment, silence was restored. The howling stopped. Sayan, in the form of a she-wolf, retreated, leaving a trail of white light in the air. Her body broke, transforming, bone by bone, skin by skin, until in place of the she-wolf a woman remained. Sayan, dressed only in the fur of the night, her eyes empty and full of pain. Brother, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I tried. But the fire won't go out. You don't have to put it out. Just tame it. She smiled palely, tears mixing with the rain that had begun to fall on them. But beyond her human face, 𝖭𝖏 saw that the fight was not over yet. Deep in her eyes, the shadows of the she-wolf lurked, wanting to return. Sayan stood up, looking at the black lake nearby. The moon was reflected in it, now pale, like a healed wound. Maybe my choice is different, she said, and her voice vibrated between two worlds. Sayan, no. But she was already stepping towards the water. Each step on the wet grass left behind traces of light, as if her soul had slowly detached itself. If I stay, the world burns. If I go, maybe you and the world will have peace. 𝖭𝖏 tried to catch her, but a cold wind, like a breath from another world, pushed him back. Sayan turned for a moment, his hair wet and his face pale but serene. Tell everyone that wolves can love, even when the world hates them. And without hesitation, he threw himself into the lake. The water burst into a blinding white light, and 𝖭𝖏, falling to his knees, covered his face. When the light went out, the lake was quiet, and on its surface floated only a single white flower, shining in the moonlight, who remained there for hours, murmuring ancient prayers in the language of their ancestors. Until dawn began to color the sky and the pale sunrise, 𝖭𝖏 understood. The fight was over. The curse had been chosen, not broken. Sayan had chosen freedom through being a she-wolf, peace through renunciation. And he, the last son of Yaransk, remained in the world as a witness to a legend. Under the sky that opened over Central Park, Tarak felt the wind bring him a faint echo, a distant howl, not of pain, but of liberation. And he understood, finally, that the white she-wolf had not perished. She had returned to the forest in the sky, where there is no guilt, but only the echo of love. That never dies. Chapter 22. The Sacrifice. Night was falling over New York like a heavy sheet, heavy with smoke and fear. The sky, red and cloudy, was reflected in the murky waters of the Hudson River, and the wind carried the echo of a distant howl, a cry that no longer belonged to any animal or man. It was the voice of pain itself, of a curse that no longer wanted an end. Tarak walked hurriedly through the empty streets, with Nuri's old flute hanging around his neck like a talisman, in his pocket, in a small bottle, the Brooklyn medicine man's. Liquor sparkled, that sacred mixture of herbs, raven blood, and deer tears. The medicine man had told him, "If you drink it, and not her, you will bind your soul to hers. She will calm down, but you will carry the burden." Tarak had not hesitated for a moment. It had been too long since he had seen his sister losing. It was time to break the chain, even if the price was his life. When he arrived in Central Park, where their duel had ended the night before, the air still smelled of blood and ash. The lake was covered in a thick fog, and in the middle of it, Sayan stood on a rock, kneeling, covered in rain. Her silver hair clinging to her skin shone in the pale moonlight, and her eyes, once amber, were now empty, like those of a being who no longer belonged to the world. "Sayan," he said, barely breathing. She turned slowly. Gratitude and despair were mixed in her gaze. "Brother, you shouldn't have come. The wolf is stronger than ever. If the moon rises completely, I won't be able to stop him." "Then let me do it." Tarak approached. She took a step back, trembling. "You can't. If you drink the liquor, the curse will move into you. The spirit of the forest told me, one blood can bind the two worlds. I am the beast, not you." Tarak smiled bitterly. "You were always the pure soul, Sayan. I was the one who raised the iron, the one who forged weapons, the one who struck the earth. Maybe I am the one who deserves the curse. You deserve peace." She wanted to stop him, but he had already uncorked the bottle. The liquor smelled of burnt grass and wet earth. A greenish-golden light pulsed inside it, like a living heart. Without saying anything, Tarak drank. The taste burned his throat like molten metal, and then the cold gripped his entire body. Sayan screamed, running towards him, but it was too late. Tarak collapsed to his knees, and blood began to flow from his nose and lips. The liquor was taking effect, binding his soul to hers, just as the medicine man had said. The sky trembled, and the moon descended lower, like a bloodshot eye. Who was watching the scene? "Why, brother?" Sayan groaned, holding him in his arms. "Because our love is stronger than the curse. If I carry the night, you will have the day. If I feel the pain, you will experience the light." His words were followed by an explosion of white light. The air filled with sparks, and the lake behind them began to boil. The she-wolf inside Sayan howled, trying to free herself, but something was pulling her back. The bond of blood. Tarak, pale, took out his iron knife and, with the last of his strength, cut his palm. "Drink from me, Sayan." She dodged, trembling. "I can't. I must. Otherwise I would pay for nothing." Sayan touched the wound and let his blood touch her lips. In that moment, a strange energy ran through her body. Her eyes closed, and her breathing became still. The wolf inside let out a last howl, which turned into a sigh. The wind stopped, and the moon began to fade. Tarak held her tightly, feeling the man's strength leave his body. Around them, the light melted into a white aura, and the distance, the city's sirens went out one by one, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Sayan, he whispered. The moon is disappearing. Do you see it? She opened her eyes, and tears ran down her cheeks. Yes, it went out. The sky was now empty. The moon had melted like wax in the thick clouds, leaving only a strange emptiness. The silence that followed was almost holy. Sayan held 𝖂𝖏 to her chest, and he smiled, although his body was getting cold. You will live, he said in a low voice. Promise me that you will never scream for death again. Only for life. She took his face in her hands. You can't leave, not now. Without you, I am nothing. You are the one who tamed the wolf in all of us. His eyes closed slightly, and a faint smile spread across his lips. At the same moment, a gentle wind passed through the trees of the park, carrying a strange sound, a howl that was neither of pain nor of triumph, but of liberation. Sayan felt his body gently return to her arms. A white light enveloped them, slowly lifting them from the ground. In that light, he saw for a moment the face of 𝖂𝖏, their lost brother, peering from the shadows of the trees. The two brothers saw each other again, returning silently to Yaransk, like wolves. Take him home, she whispered to the invisible spirit, and her tears fell on 𝖂𝖏's chest. When dawn reached the horizon, the rain stopped. Where 𝖂𝖏 had been, the ground was covered with a white, soft fur, like a wolf's. Next to her, a human footprint, a sign that both worlds had merged into the same soul. Sayan looked at the sky. The moon had completely disappeared. A peace had come into her heart that she had never known before. The curse had been stopped, not by spells, but by the love of a brother. And for the first time after years of chaos, the wolf woman smiled. Not of happiness, but of gratitude. Because in 𝖂𝖏's sacrifice, in that simple and holy gesture, was hidden the truth that neither the spirit, nor the spells, nor the gods had ever said. Sometimes, the greatest gift is not life, but the peace that bring to others before you lose yours. That morning, above the city that never sleeps, a single white bird flew in circles over the lake in Central Park. And those who passed by swore that. For a moment, they heard two voices mingling in the wind, one male, one female, singing together an ancient song, forgotten by the world, but preserved by the forest that lives beyond time. Chapter 23. The Wolf Brothers in New York. The morning after the bloody night was strangely silent. New York, the city that never sleeps, seemed for the first time numb, as if it were dreaming something it could not understand. The sky was gray, and the wind blew coldly through the skyscrapers, carrying the smell of rain and the wet earth of Central Park. And the newspapers, the headlines spoke of the night of the beast, and the massacre without a trace. But the authorities had found no body, no clear trace, no clue. Only a layer of white fur, caught on the edges of the lake, and the imprint of a muddy hand. The city murmured. On the streets of the Bronx, old women made the sign of the cross, saying that the spirit of the North had come to take what was his. And the bars of Brooklyn, sailors told stories of seeing, on the night of that night, two white wolves running along the banks of the Hudson in Harlem. An old beggar swore that he saw the two of them rising into the sky in a whirlwind of light. And in Manhattan, a young photographer said that when he developed the films taken on the night of the massacre, the same shadow appeared in every frame, two silhouettes huddled together, looking at the moon. But the truth was deeper, hidden between worlds. And the first days after that night, the police combed the entire Central Park, searching every corner, every rock, every bush. There, however, the ground seemed beaten by a strange energy. The trees had their leaves half burnt, and the birds no longer perched on their branches. Sayan and 𝖂𝖏 were gone. Some said that their bodies had been taken by authorities in secret, hidden to stop the public panic. Others, more superstitious, believed that the spirit of the forest had called them back to the world beyond, where white wolves guard the edges of the night. But those who lived close to nature, the fishermen, farmers, hunters around New York, had a different version. They spoke of the Catskill Mountains, a place where the forest is so thick that the day seems like night, and the waters flow like mirrors. There, in a hidden valley, some swore that they heard howls in the middle of the night, not wild howls, but harmonious, like a song. Two wolves, one white as snow, the other gray as scrap metal, ran together, leaving tracks that faded when the moon touched them. And a small village near Mount Phoenicia, an old woman named Martha Winslow told every passerby the same story. Once upon a time in the morning, I went out to collect water from the spring, and I saw them. Two naked, beautiful and radiant people were sleeping by the river. She had hair as white as milk, he had sunburned skin. When I approached, they stood up, but in their eyes there was something I had never seen before. A gentle sadness. I asked them who they were, but the woman just smiled and said, "We are brothers of the forest, we are looking for the way home." And then they turned into two wolves and disappeared into the forest. No one believed the old woman, but everyone listened to her with shivers. Deep down, something told them that the legend was not lying. As the months passed, the city began to regain its pulse. The crime stopped, the moon seemed gentler, and people slowly forgot about the white beast. But every year on the same spring night, when the moon was full, the city dogs all began to howl at the same time. And in the distance, an echo came from the north, a long, clear, melancholy howl. Tarak and Sayan were no longer among humans, but they had not died either. Their bodies had merged with the essence of the world. The spirit of the forest had transformed them into what they were meant to be, guardians of the balance between beast and man. And the Catskills, wolves began to reappear after decades of absence. They were white, large and wise, with amber eyes. They did not attack people, but they watched them from a distance, as if they wanted to say something. The farmers said that when one of them got lost in the forest, the wolves guided him to the light, and if someone hurt an animal for no reason, at night he would hear howls that followed him in his sleep. The legend of the two brothers spread, passing from mouth to mouth, from city to village, until it became a bedtime story told to children. Once upon a time there was a beautiful woman who carried within her the soul of a she-wolf, and a brother who chose to carry the curse in her place. They did not die, but became the wind that watches over the forest and the shadows that move among the stars. In Siberia, far away, in the place where it all began, the wind brought the same story. A group of hunters in Yakutia swore that they had seen two wolves running across the ice, leaving no trace. One had a crescent-shaped scar on his forehead, the other wore an iron pendant hanging from his neck. That pendant, the elders said, was the symbol of a blacksmith in the Bronx. Thus were born two legends, the Iron Wolf and the White She-Wolf. They no longer belonged to the world of men, but they had not left it completely either. They were where light and darkness meet, where gives birth to the song of the forest. And yet, New York has not forgotten them. In a small gallery in Manhattan, a young painter exhibited a series of paintings called The Wolf Brothers. Each painting depicted a scene: a woman with golden eyes looking out over the city, a man with a flute by a fire, two wolves running under a waning moon. No one knew who the artist was. She only signed Sayan.There. Some said the painter was the reincarnation of the she-wolf. Others believed she was her daughter. But those who looked more closely said that in each painting, the shadows of the two seemed alive, moving subtly, as if they were breathing. Thus, their story never died. In a city of glass and steel, where people forget about nature, the legend of the Wolf Brothers remained a memory of instinct, of love that transcends death and curse. For Tarak and Sayan, the world had become one endless forest, in which there were no more borders. Sometimes, on clear nights, at the top of the Catskill Mountains, tourists swear they see two wolves climbing the cliffs, looking down on the city lit up. And they say that for a moment, the moon, even if it's covered by clouds, lights up again, just for them. Maybe they've returned to Siberia, where it all began. Maybe they still walk among the shadows of New York, unseen, protecting the children who dream, the women who cry, and the men who seek forgiveness. Maybe they're just the memory of a brotherly love that defied the gods. But if you really listen on a windless night, you'll hear their howl, not in the distance, but within you. And then you'll understand, they haven't disappeared, they've returned to where they always belonged, in the hearts of those who never stop believing in the light, even when all seems lost. Chapter 24. The Howl Between the Skyscrapers. The years passed over New York like the wind over old rocks, smoothing the edges, erasing the traces, but leaving a deep, indelible vibration. The city continued to grow, to rise, to smoke. From the Bronx to Manhattan, from the old ports to the top of the glass buildings. People forgot the stories, or so it seemed. No one spoke any more of the white beast that had once haunted the streets, of the blacksmith from the Bronx who had disappeared without a trace, of the beautiful woman with golden eyes who turned into a shadow with every full moon. The world had changed. The noise of engines, the sirens, the uninterrupted lights of advertisements, all seemed to have buried the silence of the Siberian forests where it all began. But on the rare nights, when the city fell silent for a moment and the wind blew from the Atlantic, those who had their ears and hearts open heard something strange, a sound that came from above, from the cold air between the buildings, howl, long, long, carrying echoes of sadness and love. Some laughed and said that it was just the wind playing among the antennas. Others, more sensitive, covered their ears and murmured an old prayer. May the wolves watch over us. And the few who knew the legend, those who had heard it from the mouths of the elders of the Bronx or had read about the Wolf brothers in dusty books of urban folklore, knew the truth. It was not the wind. It was said that every full moon, when the silver light touched the tops of the skyscrapers and the shadows stretched across the deserted streets, two wolves appeared on the roof of the tallest building in Manhattan, one white as milk, the other gray as steel. They stood on their paws from behind and looked out at the world, at the city that never slept. Then one of them, the white she-wolf, raised her head and let out a howl so deep that even the lights of the buildings seemed to flicker for a moment. The howl was not one of attack, nor of fear. It was a prayer, a song of balance, a call for the lost souls who lived between instinct and reason, between love and hate, between man and beast. In the old neighborhoods, people had become accustomed to this phenomenon. Every full moon, children would gather at the windows and listen. The older ones would tell them, "This is how we remember that we are not just flesh and bones. That we have wildness and gentleness within us, and we must keep them in balance." The New York newspapers, in their ironic style, had called the phenomenon the Manhattan Howl. Some astronomers tried to explain it as an acoustic effect of the wind blowing it past between the skyscrapers. Others, more romantic, said that maybe it was just a collective symbol, a sound hallucination born from the memories of the city. But no one had managed to clearly record that sound. Every time someone lifted a camera, the image blurred and the sound disappeared into electronic static. One summer night, a curious reporter climbed the Empire State Building, eager to be the first to capture the mystery. He waited for hours. As the moon rose, he saw a white movement at the edge of the roof. Two shadows. And then suddenly, the air cooled and the howl erupted. The reporter fell to his knees, unable to move, and in his eyes was reflected an image he would never forget. Two wolves, one white, one gray, looking at the city with boundless gentleness. Around them, the moonlight trembled like an aurora. When he came down trembling, he could not say anything coherent. He just repeated, They were not animals. They were people who had become light. The legend of the brothers wolves began to resurface. Soon, artists, writers, and musicians were inspired by the story. An anonymous sculptor erected a bronze statue in Central Park depicting two wolves embracing, looking up at the sky. Beneath it, a simple plaque read, "For those who carry the wolf within them and are not afraid to listen to it." Tourists took pictures, but some, without knowing why, left flowers or candles at the base of the statue. Some said that on cold nights, the bronze of the statue warmed slightly, as if someone unseen had touched it. One day, a young woman, a painter, came there with a wooden flute. She began to sing a sad melody, a song that resembled the echo of the wind through the forests. When she finished, she said quietly, without addressing anyone, "For my mother, Sayan." No one knew if she was telling the truth. But her song spread. And that night, the howl between the buildings was louder than ever. Time has taken its course. The world has changed, but the legend has remained. On the edge of the Bronx, John Smith's blacksmith shop has been transformed into a small museum dedicated to the ancient craft. On one wall, a rusty plaque is engraved with the name, Tarak, Master of Fire. Visitors do not know who he was, but many say that when they touch the metal, they hear a faint sound, an echo of a hammer striking the iron. Like a beating heart. One evening, a storm hits Manhattan. The sky lights up, and thunder rolls over the city. The clouds disperse. An enormous, red moon rises above the skyscrapers. All the dogs in the city begin to bark, and then, suddenly, there is silence. Absolute silence, like before a howl. And then here. Strong, clear, heartbreaking. The howl of the Wolf Brothers. It rises everywhere, over parks, over bridges, over subways, over rivers. People stop, some cover their ears, others cry without understanding why. And above Manhattan, on the roof of a glass building, two wolves stand side by side, looking at each other. The moon illuminates their fur. Then, slowly, one disappears into the light, the other into the shadow. In the morning, the howl has disappeared. The city resumes its life. But in the hearts of those who heard, something remains, a restlessness, a memory, a desire to be closer to what is real, pure, alive. Maybe the Wolf Brothers never left. Maybe they watch beyond the veil, among antennas and clouds. Maybe every wind that passes through the buildings is their breath. Maybe every man who fights the darkness within himself is a descendant of them, a being caught between two worlds, seeking balance. And when, on a full moon night, you hear a howl that seems to come not from the sky, but from the depths of your heart, remember, they are not dead. They live in each of us. Tarak, the blacksmith with the soul of a wolf. Sayan, the woman with the heart of light. The Wolf Brothers, the invisible guardians of the city that never sleeps. And while New York continues to vibrate, between glass and steel, between life and dream, between love and instinct, the echo of their howl mixes with the wind, always carried over Manhattan, reminding us that, no matter how far we go from the forest, the beast within us never disappears. For the howl between the skyscrapers is not the wind, it is the eternal call of those who have loved beyond death. Epilogue. Years had passed since then. Manhattan had changed its face 1,000 times, but some stories never die, they just hide in shadows and noises. Every full moon night, when the wind blew through the glass buildings, a strange sound would cross the sky, a long, deep howl, coming from somewhere high above the clouds. Those who worked in the office buildings were the first to hear it. Some said it was just the wind blowing through the metal structures. Others swore they had seen figures moving on the rooftops. One tall, human, the other snow-white, with eyes that glowed in the darkness. Newspapers sometimes published strange articles about the wolf ghost of New York, but they were dismissed as urban legends. However, among the old men of the Bronx and the Indians of Brooklyn, the legend circulated differently. It was said that two brothers, one man, one she-wolf, watched over the city, punishing those who brought death and greed into its soul on the banks of the Hudson River, where the moon was reflected in the water. One could sometimes find large, deep footprints, like wolf footsteps melted into the asphalt. And the fishermen, those who stayed late at night on the docks, said that sometimes a whispered dialogue could be heard, carried by the wind. Brother, do you think the world will ever change? No, Sayan. But as long as our howl rings out, there is still hope. Some believe they still live, somewhere in the Catskill Mountains, far from humans. Others say they have returned to Siberia where it all began. But the truth remains hidden in the shadows of the city. One night, a child who lived near Central Park woke his mother, trembling. Mom, I saw a woman with white hair on the roof, and a man with fiery eyes next to her. The mother smiled at him, thinking he was dreaming. But outside, between the buildings, the moon rose large and red. Then, the howl was heard, clear, powerful, heartbreaking, a howl that belonged neither to the world of humans nor to that of beasts. At was the voice of the Wolf Brothers, eternal guardians of the balance between man and beast. And Manhattan, for a moment, fell silent.